Hello and welcome to the Weekly Scroll podcast brought to you by the Adventure Archive. My name is Ryan, and today, not only do I have a special guest, but a special guest co-host, Christian Sorrell. How are you doing this morning, Christian?
Hi, I am doing great. Thank you for having me.
And our special guest, sorry, I'm trying to talk while moving windows around real quick, is Diogo Nogueira, the prolific creator of not only Primal Quest, but a number of other games. How are you doing this morning, Diogo?
Hey everyone, I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here and talk about Primal Quest and talk to both of you again.
Yeah, so he says again because Exalted Funeral recently had their online convention it was awesome. I really enjoyed it a lot. I hope they do it again, and I hope a lot more people show up to the next one. But both myself and Christian actually got to play in a game of Primal Quest run by Diogo at EFCon, which is one of the reasons I asked Christian to join me today. And it was a really great time. And that's when me and Diego actually started kind of chatting a little bit more, and we talked about coming on the show. So I highly recommend doing that if that comes up again. But yeah, today we are talking about Primal Quest. I got all the Primal Quest goodies here, but specifically this bad boy right here. Great game. I guess my first question would be, what was your original inspiration to even make Primal Quest? Like, why Primal Quest versus something else?
Yeah, well, in the book, if you open, there is like a little test to talk about that I have always been like obsessed with dinosaurs as a kid, and because I don't know exactly why, but I theorized that we had a chocolate here in Brazil that was called surpresa, which is kind of surprise, and it was in the shape of different dinosaurs, so you could always buy more chocolate because each chocolate was in the shape of a different dinosaur, and each chocolate came with like a collectible card with a cool picture of a painted picture of a dinosaur with like information about the dinosaurs in the back, and I used it to collect all sort of dinosaur stuff. Like I bought those magazines in the newspapers that you would buy. Each issue would come with some bones, and you would assemble like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, like over like a year and a half buying stuff. And I always had the dream to have like a pet velociraptor, because like dogs and cats were too boring for me. I wanted a velociraptor, and because of Jurassic Park, they were cloning dinosaurs, so maybe I could clone a velociraptor someday. And I don't know. Primal Quest is like a mixture of so many things I like. Dinosaur, sword and sorcery, fantasy, and a little bit of weird fantasy with sci-fi, and a little bit of horror in the mix. And of course, Gand Tartakovsky Primal animated series that just had the season 2 released on HBO Max. It's a really big push that made me, well, I can try to do something like that, but with more weirdness, more sword and sorcery, and incorporating some cool design ideas I'm having about games and how games work and how we can turn things more into play, So I think that's that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think when I don't know how South America is, but in America, I think that there's a couple of things you get into as kids, and we're all like, I think we're relatively ish the same age. I feel like dinosaurs was one of them. I feel like cowboys or whatever was one of them, and I feel like Star Wars was one of them. I definitely had a dinosaur phase, but I don't think that one stuck.
Yeah,
but
I had those dinosaurs and Star Wars.
Cowboys, yeah, I was definitely a Star Wars kid. Christian, did you have a thing as a kid?
Yeah, dinosaurs for sure. Star Wars too. The odd thing with me with Star Wars was it was less the actual like movies, and it was more like those technical manuals they used to sell. They would have like someone would make like a blueprint of like, oh, this weird ship from the background of one shot. That was always much more the thing that I was like, my backpack was full of these technical manuals.
Yeah, I
All
used it
right.
to carry around a lantern to play as a lightsaber. So that was my thing. Like lightsabers, yay!
Go. I don't want to forget Lego too. I know we got some Lego people out there. So but I think
Yeah,
Lego did
yeah, yeah.
dinosaurs and Star Wars, so you could just hit a little bit of both with that. Um so like I said, Christian and I got to play the game, and it's really fun. Like, the game mechanics themselves are really, really interesting. I know you have a list of, kind of inspirations for RPGs and games here, but specifically, was there anything that you kind of really looked towards when you were inspired by the game mechanics themselves, or were you was it a lot of it just things that you've been experimenting and playing around with a little bit?
Yeah, I think my work as a game designer is kind of incremental because the first game I tried to publish was called Bruxos e Bárbaros here in Brazil, which roughly translates as Warlocks and Barbarians, which started much like DCC and D&D and Astonishing Source for Hyperborea, like a more AD&D-like, but still incorporating some of the more narrative stuff from Fate and from games that I like, from like Fiasco and Generators and stuff. But it would be too big for me to even finish, so it was never published. I just had like a Kickstarter. And then my first published game was Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells. That is very much white hack and black hack, but there is already some narrative stuff in it. There's some modifications in the magic system, and I was playing around with that. And as I went further with Solar Blades and Dark Streets, I started trying to simplify more stuff, just using D20s and D6s. And then I started experimenting with more narrative approach with Lost in the Fantasy World and Cosmos Sours, for example. And with Primal, and then I went a more minimalistic phase with my horror games that really inspired by Into the Odds. And I feel like Primal Quest just brings all this up together and has a lot of Into the Odd in there. It has a lot of Fate, has a little bit of Genesis system and Cortex, and a little bit of Barbarians of Lemuria. And this is DCC for me, maybe not mechanically, but inspirational as the feel of the game, like this weird pulp fantasy, a little bit of Gonzo too, So I think those are the main ones that bring to my head, and obviously the way I'm trying to develop the game and the line has influences for Morkborg, Mothership, and all these very successful and very good games that has this OSR and kind of zany approach that I'm trying to go with Primal Quest and the work these designers and creators have done are certainly inspiring what I'm trying to do with Primal Quest and the other stuff I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see you wearing the Mothership shirt there.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking today, like, I feel like I dressed the way I was to dress when I was like a punk rock kid, but instead of rock t-shirts, I wear RPG t-shirts now. Yes.
Yeah. RPG t-shirts and Exalted Funeral shirts and stuff like that have slowly taken over the majority of my wardrobe, and it's definitely all the things that I wear on stream. So, and I'm rocking an Exalted Funeral shirt again today.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I was gonna say one of the things that it's just interesting you mentioned those like difference, that breadth, I guess, of inspirations, and kind of even I think before we went live, you were talking about like your past DCC, like Dungeon Crawl Classics kind of obsession. And I do think when I was reading through it, and I mean this in a good way, it did strike me, I was surprised by sort of like the individual sort of components making me be like, oh, this really reminds me of Fate. But then like going to another page and being like, oh, this really feels more like OSR, and feeling like those two things I don't see combined very often. And liking that aspect, I guess. How did you feel like, what, and maybe this was something that came out in playtesting, but what was connecting those, how did you decide where to find where that line should go, because I know in the past when I've played just stuff that's very narrative forward, say like Fate, right? It's very open, very like tags and words, and you can change how the scene works. I feel like some things that are a little more procedural, like overland travel or exploration or combat, those kind of things can be hard as players to like grapple with. But I feel like you ended up with a good balance. So how are you kind of, I guess, thinking in the design process of like, what should I make more open and narrative, and what should I kind of build a procedure for?
Yeah, I mean, when I started playing when I was a kid, and I played NZD, Vampire, and everything. And I started playing in the college, and when I come back play D&D 4th edition, and that didn't work out for me at all. And I went to see what else was out there, and I bumped into basically the OSR and the story games that called themselves indie RPGs, although for me OSR are completely indie RPGs too. But there was kind of this divide for some reason, and I started checking both out, and I liked what I saw on both communities. But there is this rivalry or this animosity or something that kind of almost felt like it was incompatible for me to stay on both. But I tried to hang out of both. But at least here in Brazil, on the more story-focused games, they were really always talking trash about OSR games, and that didn't make me feel very welcome, because I like the story game, OSR games too. So I kind of left the story games community and basically hang out with OSR communities, and that led me to hang out in OSR circles on the when I went kind of international, trying to hang out on Google Plus and trying to interact with the people I consumed the material by. I loved the material they were making, so I started interacting with them. But one thing, like, they really concentrated on OSR, but they didn't spend much time talking about what they didn't like. So, but for me, I still like the more narrative games, and started playing both of them and started incorporating narrative elements on my OSR games. Like, even if I was playing maybe DCC, I had house rules to do this kind of stuff even on DCC. And as I started making my own games, that was kind of natural. And as I said, it was kind of like a process. I started small and adding more stuff and experimenting and see what I could do. And I think with Primal Quest, I have this really balanced idea. My idea is that I really like OSR style gameplay. That I really base it around what Matt Finch has written on the Quick Primer for Old School Gaming, and the Principal Apocrypha that people made, like explaining the style, but it really isn't connected to rules. So I try to make games that have the elements of this more modern approach, that share more freely the narrative, try to bring the players more into the game, not only their characters, more the players themselves, and still try to adhere to the experience of a old school style of adventure play, So that's what I try to do.
Yeah, I actually, so I'm late to the RPG scene. I was a Magic the Gathering kid when I was younger, and then I realized when I got older, all the books I read were all Dungeons and Dragons books, but no one ever told me what Dungeons and Dragons was. So I read all the Tor fantasy, all of that kind of stuff. So I was later to the scene. I started in 2014 with 5th edition. And it was fun for a while till I realized there was other stuff, and I realized other stuff was better. And then, especially as the OSR scene, and the scene itself, I don't know if it's quite the same here, but I think I missed the whole Google Plus era of the OSR scene and the Reddit part of that. So I can't really speak to that. But I know here, like between OSR and NSR, between retro clones and these newer versions where it's rulings over rules, but with more modern mechanics, I know Yohai Gal is really into the NSR and kind of steering it away from the OSR a little bit. But as you guys both just said, I think what's great about it is those OSR games are something that really speak to me specifically. I love 2d6 systems. I'm not necessarily powered by the apocalypse. I have my own opinions, but 2d6 is such an interesting just set of dice, and you can do a million different things with it. And I can name 12 different rule sets that use 2d6 off the top of my head right now, and yours does it in a different way too. I've always been obsessed with 2d6, but you subtract it, because the math on it is really, really interesting. The first time I saw that was on this little this page that Adam Bass put out about 2d6. But yours, for those that haven't read Primal Quest, it's really at its core, it's 2d6, but you create dice pools of positive and negatives for the situation that you're in. So you get this kind of like mathy bit to it. It's got that kind of like OSRE, this modern kind of OSRE kind of feel to it, with the way that works. But I think you even said it, we were playing, like, as you build these dice pools, it's like you can try to like bullshit your way into like more stuff. Like if you can get it to narratively work, you can get more positives and negatives. Then you roll your positive pool, negative pool, subtract the negative from the positive, and that's what you get. So it does have that kind of like I said, kind of mathy, but in like a very simplified way feel to it.
Yeah.
But the amount of
it feels
narrative,
mathy. Yeah. It feels
but the amount of narrative
play,
you can get into it. Yeah.
If you play, you just throw the dice and look for the highest, and that's it. You just subtract one from the other, and you're done. And if it's the highest is a 6, the 6 has a special effect. But it feels mathy, but as you play and you realize you just have to look for the highest, and 6 are the highest. It's very, very fast, and you can do a lot of things with it, because it has a more narrative effect, and the play can really seem like a pulp novel, like you used to read. Like you can do crazy stuff with that, and it's really fun to play around and see how the scenes can get really outrageous and really exciting, and feels very, very pulpy. And for me, pulpy is very OSR,
Yeah, I really like you're saying 2d6. I always like dice pools just because I think it's fun to roll a lot of dice. But yeah, to anyone who hasn't read it, like you said, you do just, when you roll, say if you have 3 negative dice and 5 positive dice, you roll them and you just look to see what the highest positive you rolled is and the highest negative you rolled. So it's almost like you're rolling advantage or disadvantage on a bunch of rolls. But I think the other thing that's nice compared to at least most of my recent dice pool stuff is more like me playtesting ideas of my own. But the thing that I like about that simplification, like you said, is it's faster, but it allows you to have like mixed success or grades of success that aren't really big. Because I've definitely played some games with way too many grades of success. Whereas most of the time, in Primal Quest, it's like you're going to be at +5 is kind of your max. Not, the math could work out higher than that, but it's mostly going to be +5 is the best possible. And then like -5 would be like you rolled a 1 on your positive and a 6 on the negative. And that feels like enough. That's like enough gradients that you can really work with, but not, I'm not rolling going, I got a 46 compared to the, big gorilla's 14. And that. So I do think that streamlined aspect helps. I know one thing that I feel like stuck out to me, because I have a lot of experience playing it, Diogo, that you had listed in the like your inspirations for it, is Genesis. I feel like Genesis, I don't feel talked about, right? We were talking about all these very like, we're in the RPG landscape, right? OSR, NSR, whatever. And then there's like Fantasy Flight Games made their Star Wars games that I think a lot of people in these circles, at least it feels to me like kind of didn't play Genesis. How did, like, what did you like about that system that you pulled for here? I just feel like I rarely see that as an inspiration on people's projects, but I like a lot of, I think, what you pulled from it.
I feel like I'm being arrogant to say that, but I feel like Primal Quest system does what Genesis does, but only the 6s. But the idea is that Genesis, the system is also incremental, because they created it with Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition, and they made it a little better with Star Wars, and they simplified with Genesis. So it's like a dice pool system with different dice, and each dice can give you successes or points of success or failure, because the difficulty is also based with dice, like Primal Quest. Like you have the good dice and bad dice, and you can get symbols for success and symbols for failure. So it's also special dice too. So one of the things people didn't like about these games from Fantasy Flights was that they had to buy all these special dice, and each game they released with kind of the same system, they had new dice for it. So that's what pushed people like back, you know. But it was really fun because you could do a roll, like do a test, and like we're trying to break into this safe, you know. And it's really technological. You're like trying to hack at it, and you could succeed. You hack into it, but you couldn't stop the alarm, and it's gonna sound in 5 minutes. So you have 5 minutes to get inside and do something. You know, you could have success and failure, different degrees of success and failure, and additional consequence, both positive or negative. So you could fail to open the safe, but you could discover there is maybe another way inside on another building that goes from maybe for the sewers or something like that, you know. And you can add details to the scene, which is kind of narrative and stuff like that. So it's fun. Yeah. And I try to do that with only the 6s, and because like the overall result will tell if it's a success or failure, but the number of good dice and bad dice that roll at a 6 will determine additional positive or negative consequence to your like action and scene.
Yeah, that's the thing that when we were playing at EFCon, I liked about it, is that came out because without having to have like, oh, here's a 12-sided die that has 3 lightsabers, 4 little starbursts, you know, like all their specific little symbols that they had in that game. It was like, okay, I rolled 2 positive 6s and a negative 6, and then looking at that as like a group, or like, you know, between like the player who took the action and the person running the game, and going like, okay, so you succeed, but something bad happens and something good happens. And that's sort of like, that like more collaborative at the play at the table of getting to decide the scene. I feel like, you know, it feels really unique, I think, for this kind of game. And I think even when we were playing, it took us like 30 minutes, 40 minutes to like be like, oh, we can do that, because it you know, it felt like dungeon crawly OSRE, but then like 30 minutes in, we were like, oh no, I can say like, there's a branch over there that I see on the wall, and I point it out to the next person, you know, like where you're like, I can shape the world a little bit. So that was definitely an exciting aspect of me. So I do think, you know, I think you distilled that component pretty well.
I'm happy to make it more a social game, you know. Even with then we do like the adventure like this, we will talk, I don't know if we'll talk about that, but doing the painting, the cave painting as a social activity, as a group, and have these mechanics that put the group on the table, like this social mechanic, and having RPGs as a social game, I think that's something that I'm really happy about how things turned out.
Yeah, I think one of the things he just said too is the group narration between the player, not only the players and the GM, you know, because I think there's a lot of components to some of the, you know, like big, you know, popular games out there where it feels like no matter how many times they say like the GM's a player too, the GM doesn't really feel like a player, you know, especially with like a lot of the prep and this and that, and then, you know, rolling against the player with monsters and things like that. But when we were playing Primal Quest, you know, there were times where you even like, well, can I make a suggestion? How about this? Or like, you know, there might be this thing coming up a little bit. Why don't we steer it kind of in this direction? So it has this kind of almost, I know one of the inspirations in there was Fiasco. So it kind of feels like setting a scene a little bit sometimes, especially with those positives and negatives you get, where you get that extra positive on top of your roll because you did something well. A lot of times that turned into a conversation between us, like, you know, because one of the things I like, that really stuck out, that I really liked, especially in retrospect, was when you get those positives, you don't bank those. It's the situation that you were just trying to accomplish. You get positives or negative that came out of that situation. So you're not just sitting on like 6 bonuses or something like that. It's just like, no, like how can you pass that out into the situation you're at? Even if you pass it to your other players at the table, and then how do you all decide, you know, when you get, say you get 2 bonuses,
what happened, but in the moment,
like moment by moment and scene by scene, and as you leave an area and go into the next area, like you kind of leave all that behind a little bit. You don't take a bunch of bonuses with you when you go into a new area. It's a whole new area, and you're kind of like not necessarily starting fresh, especially if you're taking damage and things like that, but you kind of are to an extent. You're not bringing a lot of those bonuses with you, so you feel like when you leave an area, at least in the adventure that we were in, it felt like each area was kind of to an extent like we accomplished that area and kind of kept moving forward, as opposed to kind of like the thought necessarily of like backtracking, especially with the not quite cinematic, but like the very, to an extent, a cinematic way that you wrote the adventure. To as you walk in, it's like almost a whole new experience in each different cave area. So like getting to leave those things behind and move into the next scene was just a really interesting way to make the narrative feel group, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I would feel
unless the tag that you create with those roles makes sense to carry, like, oh, I found something, then you have the tag that you carry on, right? As you found those arcane focus, for example, as you were playing, and then you carried it to other scenes and stuff. Sorry, Christian.
Oh no, you're fine. Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I tend to always think in that like in my mind, I'm in that like cinematic-y scope most of the time in play, especially if I'm running a game. But yeah, I think like you said, that like, hey, I've got 3 boons on this roll, but those really have to show themselves now, feels very cinematic to me, because in my head that's like, the person jumps across a big pit, just barely makes it, and as they're hanging on, we get the shot of like them looking down off the cliff and they can see something shiny on the stuck in the wall or whatever, right? And it's like, it isn't just like, well, you got a crit point, add a token to your sheet that says you have a crit point, and that doesn't, it's only mechanical, it's not narrative at all. It lends itself well to those kind of moments that I think would be interesting. So I guess it's worth mentioning too, but we played the Cave of Our People, which is the like introductory adventure that you put together for it, which is also separate from, what is it called? Mother's Veil, which is sort of like the hex crawl that's in the
it's kind of the introductory setting. We will have a like more detailed gazetteer of the Mother's Veil, but that one's like an introduction for the setting and has like the major focal points of it, with some hooks and encounters and things going on.
So do you have, we chatted about this a little bit before, and you said, one of the things you wanted to build was communities like Mothership and Merkborg, because anyone that knows the indie scene at all knows how kind of like rabid those communities were, especially in the beginning, to just eat up these great systems, and how those creators were so open to people using their system and playing. It didn't feel restrictive, like needing like one specific website where you're allowed to publish like very specific things only that you're allowed to in bits and pieces of it. They were very, and I think one of the things that really led to their success, because I've listened to like Sean McCoy on Eco's podcast, The Lost Bay, and they specifically talk about like the building the community and how bringing in a lot of those community creators and people can really help grow their games. And obviously with Mothership and Merkborg, that was a huge part of it. And I know that you're really like right in the back of the book, it says like, if you want to create content, if you want to do whatever. So I can only imagine, it's a great game, and I think there's already pamphlet adventures, there's already a bunch of people. I think Christian's been tweeting about writing content for it. So what are your plans for kind of like building that community and expanding on this content a little bit?
Well, I still have like a bunch of public domain images that I get around archives on the internet that I have to treat and release, because I have like 4 packages of public domain treated images that you can use for publications with dinosaurs, environments, and weird things that you can. At least for me, it's inspirational for creating stuff for it. But I still have like a bunch to treat. I have a bunch of mid-journey artwork that have been creating, inspired by the game, and have been posted on Instagram. I'm gonna make like a huge package for free for anyone to use to make their stuff for Primal Quest 2. and I don't know. I want to I have to sit down and like do a review of the stuff. We had for Primal Jam, the first Primal Jam happened in June, and the idea is to have like every year do like a June Primal Jam for people to make it, this kind of stuff. And I'm already talking to some of the people that made stuff for Primal Jam to work together on some things. I have my idea is that if you like Primal Quest so much that you're doing something yourself for Primal Quest, like if I can do something with you in the future, I'm gonna try to do that, because if you're like supporting me, I would like to support you too, you know, like bring this community and I don't know. The community has always been very helpful to me. If I can do the same, I'll try to as much as I can, you know. And
yeah, I think
the way.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like the way Primal Belief and the pamphlets were published from Exalted Funeral, like they did this for the jam, and I mentioned them. Oh, maybe we could try maybe reaching Exalted Funeral, and things worked out, and the game launched with three third-party products in print already, and for me that was really exciting. That had never happened with any other game of mine, so I'm excited for that. And as I said, if anyone wanted to do like a zine for Zine Quest, I would do anything I can do to help and boost the signal, and I don't know, you know. And I don't know what else. If you think I can do anything else to help booster Primal Quest community, let me know, and I will see what I can do, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think specifically because I had actually I had found on itch those stock art like archives that you had put together, the first like 3 or 4 of them, and that's definitely, I think, kind of unique, at least in my experience with making things for both Morkborg and Mothership. Their communities are very, like, their licenses are very open. Their communities are obviously very like collaborative and open that way. But that's something I haven't seen, I guess. Like I haven't seen the creator of a game be like, I'm going to compile some of these resources for you. So it isn't just even like, hey, you can go make what you want. It's like, I'm going to give you some of the tools. So that's definitely, I think, pretty interesting to me. But yeah, I was going to go back to the book and just stress, to anyone listening who hasn't read it, that, yeah, I mean, on page 1, it says, it's like the third thing right after, like, here's how you can get the character sheet. It says, want to make a Primal Quest compatible product? And it has like your license. And then also at the back, it says like, oh, hey, did you wish there was more in one of these hexes from the hex crawl? You can just make that and publish it. So, yeah. I mean, I think just that alone, I know, at least for me, as also someone who's not really been fully on the RPG train for a super long length of time, I hope to see that pays off, along with the sort of Exalted Funeral kind of like that. How has that relationship been? I guess, Ryan, I don't know how, like, inside baseball-y we get on that terms, but that's, I think, a thing that struck me at least as interesting. Not that we have to speak specifics, I guess, to Exalted Funeral, but this is a game that in print, at least right now, is just available right via Exalted Funeral. So how did that work for you in terms of like looking for a way to print, and then also that like launching with, here's my things for my game, and also here's some other people's things for my game? Like, what's that relationship been like, or how did what landed you on going that way?
I don't know. I feel like I know Matt from Exalted Funeral since from the beginning of Exalted Funeral. If my memory doesn't fail me, like, we met through Full Metal RPG podcast guests, and we were introduced and started talking, and he and Christian started doing their store and their stuff. And by that time, I was publishing with Gallanite Games, which is another publisher from a friend of mine, Alan Barr. And I've been publishing with them until early this year. And because he's published, Alan published his own stuff and stuff from other creators too. And so it had kind of schedule of release, what could be released this time or not. And I'm starting to work my way to work as a game designer full time soon, and so I would need more steady release schedule. And we talked a little bit, and we decided it was best for both of us to seek to end the partnership with Gala Night Games. And I had already published something with Exalted Funeral, my solo journaling game called Lost in the Deep, which is like you play as the last surviving dwarf on an expedition to reclaim our home. It is basically the game as that guy that's found in the Lord of the Rings movie holding that diary saying, I hear the drums, they're coming, and he died. You're that guy, so you play trying to get out of Moria, but it's not Moria in the game, but like you came with your brothers and sisters and you woke up something evil, and then you're trying to get out of your own home and seeing your friends, your brothers and sisters dead, the things of your culture, and these drums coming and these monsters are coming, and right, each day you wake up and you try to find an exit, and you can, or you will die trying. So, and I had already published that. It was very good. Or I have always had a good relationship with them. And when I was not in a partnership with anymore, and I was trying to decide how I would publish my other games, because I had like 6 written games, 6 projects already like written, and 2 of them already ready to publish, like Cosmos Hours and Primal Quest were almost ready. And I sought them out. I talked with a friend of mine, Jared, their creator, has already been working with me like since the beginning from Sharp Swords, and for some coincidentally or not, he's working with Exalted Funeral now. And I talked to him and said, "Oh, if you want to publish with us, we want to publish everything you want to do." And now we have like a partnership, and basically what I was doing with Alan, like publish everything with Alan, I'm publishing now everything with Exalted Funeral, and they treated me very well, and they're very nice, and it's been fun. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, Exalted Funeral. They seem like really good people. I know it's my primary. Honestly, if I look through all my spending for the past year, I probably spent more on Exalted Funeral than just about anything but gas. Yeah. So they seem like good people and a great place for our scene specifically. Yeah,
it feels great to get my money back from them.
Yeah, very much. It's like that feeling of that people joke about how like creators in the space are all just sending the same $10 around to each other. Yeah, it's like that. You're like, oh, this will just help fund my next order from them. Yeah.
So outside of building the community, what are the plans for the actual, not third-party content, but core Primal Quest content? Because I know this was billed as Primal Quest Essentials. So is there going to be like an expanded Primal Quest game? Is there going to be, like a hardback? Is there going to be special editions? Like what's the plan?
Should I talk about the immediate plans, or like my obsessive plans for having like a line for like 6-7 years of Primal Quest stuff? Because I have lots of notes for like doing a lot of stuff for Primal Quest, but like for immediately, we have already written the solo and GM-less rules for Primal Quest, so you can play as a group with no GM and just using the tools to generate stuff. And I have played with my group. I played with them, so we had no GM and just playing, and we found like a laboratory of an alien scientist that was capturing humans to put on a zoo on somewhere else, and we couldn't escape. We were captured. So. But yeah, we have this. We have a GM screen, like a referee screen coming up with amazing art and basically all the rules, but the character creation rules on the back. So you don't have to consult the book for the rules if you don't want to. There will be like a really cool, inspiring art to bring the help with immersion. I really like James Strings. because of the art and the utility for you to consult something, not necessarily for hide, because especially in Primal Quest, the GM doesn't roll dice anyway, so it's more about helping you, like setting up your notes and stuff and having the tools you need there and having like an awesome art. But the GM is going to come with a book with random tables too. Probably the Gazetteer from the Mother's Veil, like a little more information about the setting. And we have a series of adventures by Gustavo Torteleone. And the Primal World of Taya zine is about 70% written, which will be a zine bringing adventures, setting information, monsters, and like supplemental stuff for the game. Like this is for like immediate, maybe until the end of the year or early next year for this stuff to come out. But yeah, it's Primal Quest Essentials. The idea is to have maybe year and a half, have an Essentials 2.0, which would be like a bigger zine, maybe a 64 to 80 pages zine with the rules, a little bit more details and extra stuff that I already feel I want to add, and maybe explanations, because Essentials doesn't have explanations of the rules, just the rules themselves, and a little bit more details for the characters, maybe some ready to play archetypes to ease people into the game. And I'll probably include the Caveor people inside the Essentials. And the idea is then after that have maybe 2 years, have like a core book, like maybe a hardback with really awesome art, maybe a special edition. And who knows? Sorry. If things go well, I have a dream to have like a prehistoric box set, special edition prehistoric box set with special dice, a referee book. The way I think Mothership is doing their referee book, like the referee book is not like principles and stuff like how to start your game, how to make your first adventure, how to start your campaign, like easy to follow step to start really playing, like make this thing as useful as possible for you to use at the table and play the game. But yeah, I have plans for lots of adventures. We have like alternate settings. I have the idea to make this Dino World Down, which will be basically a setting of Jurassic Park, like these islands. And I want to do exactly like Isaac Williams and Andre did on Games Universe, to make this box set with all the rooms there and invite other creators to do different places in the islands, like different biomes in the islands with different dinosaurs. So as you play, you can navigate where you go on the island and try to survive and escape the Dino World Down scenario. And have different, we have a friend doing Primal West, would be like a Western with dinosaurs. And
nice.
I want to do something like Thunder the Barbarian in the future with dinosaurs. And, explore this primal thing, like Primal Mars, maybe Barsoom with dinosaurs. But I have a Mega Dungeon for Primal Quest. We have an idea for a Mega Dungeon for Primal Quest. And, I have many plans, but I have to take it slow and not get lost in my fantasy of things I want to do,
There was a cartoon growing up. I mean, a lot of the cartoons that we watched as kids were basically just giant commercials for action figures, but I can't remember what it was called. But it was the Dino Riders, where it was like a spaceship or something went back in time, then turned their dinosaurs into like fighting mounts or something. I think that's what it was.
Oh yeah,
it was literally just called Dino Riders. Yeah,
they just rode dinosaurs. It was a good time. So, but they had like battle armor and like laser guns attached to them and stuff. So I can imagine that would be great to play with the dinosaurs in there.
Yeah.
So
there was the Dinosaurs cartoon. Do you know Dinosaurs?
I don't think I know Dinosaurs.
Do you know I have a game called Cosmosaurs, right?
I do.
It's like Space
absolutely.
Rangers dinosaur. Dinosaurs was basically that. There was some difference, but yeah, it was like space dinosaurs. but they have like different factions, like the good dinosaurs and bad dinosaurs. And yeah, Cosmosaurs are really a bit more gonzo and weird than Dinosaurs, but Cosmosaurs is inspired by that. 80s, I really like 80s cartoons. Like pop culture is a really big influence on my stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen this before in my life, but it looks amazing. Dino saucers. Wow. Yeah, I mean I have Cosmosaurs, absolutely. But no, I don't have that. There's so much, I mean, there was so much dinosaur stuff when we were younger, and it's really cool to see it come back, especially in the way that you're doing it as well. But Diego, when I started this podcast, you were one of the very first people that I wanted to bring on the show. Really? It's taken us what, like 35 episodes to get you to come on, mostly because I'm generally too scared to ask people that I really respect and enjoy their work to come on the show. But I just want to say I really appreciate you coming on. Getting to play in the game with you was fantastic. Meeting Christian through it was great. Primal Quest I'm super excited for it. I think especially with who you are as a person and the way that you're supporting the community, I can only imagine this is going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So I'm really excited to see how Primal Quest continues to grow over the next couple of years, and I will definitely be first in line to get that special edition box set. Anyone that watches the show knows that I can't say no to a special edition or a box set. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. It has been great chatting with you. And
thanks so much for having me. It's a really honor, and it feels great, and I love talking about this stuff. And it's really helpful. And then I wanna try to live with it, and I hope it's really successful because I really have to leave my day job. I really do. Yeah. So please buy Primal Quest, people! Yay!
Yeah, and listen, we're gonna push it as much as we can. So as you continue to put more stuff out, we're gonna keep talking about it. So,
thank you so much.
Everybody, stay with us. We're gonna go to a quick BRB. Say goodbye to Diogo real quick, and we'll be back in just a little bit. And we're actually going to read through and talk about Primal Quest Essentials, myself and Christian here. So we'll be back in just a moment, everybody.
Goodbye for now.
Hello, and welcome back to the Weekly Scroll podcast. We just had our interview with Diogo Nogueira, and our special guest co-host. Again, really get to talk too much about who this gentleman is. But this is Christian Sorrell. And Christian, what are some things that someone might know that you've put out?
Most people, it seems like if you're one of the few that does know me, you would probably know me as MeatCastle or MeatCastle Gameware, specifically being the sort of rebranding I did on Twitter and Discord and stuff like that. So mostly mothership stuff at this point, but in terms of like stuff I put out that I ask people to give me money for. But I've made some Morkborg stuff, I've made some system neutral stuff, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's mainly how people would know me. I'm on the cusp kind of wrapping up my biggest project so far, which was part of Zine Month in February. I ran a Kickstarter for the Bloodfields at Black Star Station, a mothership battle royale sort of themed hex crawl and like a black market space station that surrounds the sort of like blood sport death games. And that was my biggest thing. That was me being like, I'm going to ask people to give me money before this is done. And this is like my first zine. I was going to do layout on it. So earlier when we were interviewing just a little bit ago, you had mentioned that like kind of being, not being in the Google Plus days, not being whatever. I was like, I just mostly played D&D until like 2 years ago, right? 2.5 years ago. So I would say kind of the same thing for me. Like everything that I've made was me going from spending way too much time prepping for D&D and going, what if instead of working for 40 hours on a thing we're going to play once, I worked for 80 hours on something I could put online and a lot of people could play. That was kind of my transition. So I do still run a lot, but yeah, so mostly I've made mothership stuff. I have 2 pamphlet adventures, one called The Mole on Pyrad 1, which is like a space punk commune, where there is a corporate spy among the punks and people are getting killed in secret. And then I just recently put out one that's kind of a joke one called There's a Goblin on the Loose in Icarus Station, that not really a joke one. I guess it's like a comedy horror. It's like the Leprechaun movie where he's in space it's like that. It's like, what if you were all getting stabbed by just a fantasy goblin who's for some reason on a space station, and he can drop stuff like scrolls of magic missile, and it's like, what does that do in Mothership? Does it work? That's up for the GM to decide. So yeah, I just like making stuff, chatting stuff, reading games, that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm not, the most academic of RPG people, I guess I'd say.
No,
That's
I mean,
me,
I'm kind of the same boat. Like I said, I started in 2014 with 5e. I wish I would have started sooner, and I obviously went back and I read. I've read all the core books for 4 and 3. Especially with like a lot of the BX retro clones and stuff like that. At least have gone back and read a lot of the early stuff, and then these kind of like modern interpretations of the early stuff. But I'm newer to it too. And then I did a lot of 5e. I'm the kind of person who I give things like 110%, and I'll let a lot of stuff go until it like they burn the last bridge, and then I just hate it. It's only all or nothing. And 5e did that for me about 2.5 years ago ish. I think I started like that trend away from it, where I was just like, man, I've really defended this for a really long time, and I can't keep defending these things about this game. And then I started looking for other stuff. And that's got us to where we are today. So I don't think you give yourself enough credit with some of these adventures. I will say, I don't think, without looking at the title, I've ever said there's a goblin on the loose at Icarus Station the correct way. I wrote it out every time so I could write it, because it's always like, there's a goblin on Icarus Station, there's a goblin here and that. But they're great adventures. Those are ones that I'd really like to play. We are eventually going to get to running Mothership on the actual place out of our channel, and especially pamphlet adventures work really, really well for streams to be able to do like a 1 or 2 shot. So those are definitely near the top of our list to be able to run. So yeah, give yourself more credit. I think a lot more people know
I appreciate that.
And I can't tell you how excited I am. I was a backer of your current Kickstarter project, and I am very, very excited to get that in hand. Even just the art on the cover, I was just like, all right, I don't care what it is, I'm getting this one. And then as soon as I heard like this like blood sport battle royale, I'm like, done, extra done. So I'm excited to get that in hand. So we'll show that off on stream.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have print samples for it. So yeah, here's the cover. You can see it. So yeah, it's just about there. I'm getting it out to people, but yeah, I mean, that I think kind of like a lot of stuff, or even with, probably we'll get into it when we're talking in the game today, but it's like, yeah, part of a lot of that creative drive in the RPG space for me is that just like, what's something that I haven't quite seen done before? And that's weirdly, that was Battle Royale is kind of actually attached to the beginnings of me kind of going from just being a D&D player into being like becoming my group's forever DM and stuff. Because a long time I went online and I was like, it was before Fortnite. It was like when PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds was out. My friends and I were playing that, and we were like, yeah, and I was just like, it's so odd, right, that there's no good RPG way to do Battle Royale. And I searched around, and then I just sort of pocketed that in the back of my mind for 2 or 3 years. So then when I was coming down to like, what should my first project be? I was like, then at that point, I was like, it's really weird that there hasn't been like a specific Battle Royale thing I can find, because this is when, now it's like Fortnite's the biggest game. Not that this is really like Fortnite. This is more like the actual scary real version of, no, you're going to get your head blown off if you don't kill all these nice innocent people that are just like you, kind of a thing. But yeah, so it's really fun though. But I think the whole community overall and doing stuff is just great. So I always encourage anybody to get in on basically any of it they can, because I feel like everyone just wants to play fun games and make cool things. So
yeah, I mean, and that was kind of, one of the impetus for this entire situation here with the podcast and everything, was to try to showcase more indie games and talk to more indie people and really get more people involved in this scene into what we're doing here. And like I said in chat, that was my weekly knock on 5e. So I'll try to keep that to a minimum going forward. But anyway, so we're actually going to hop into a brief segment of Kickstart the Podcast, and then we're going to go into our read through of Primal Quest. So kick over to that. That's the right window, and we're even in the right spots. Look at us. So the very first one I want to talk about is this Merkborg zine, Trapped Within. We haven't talked about Merkborg as much as far as projects go on the channel. I think there has, I want to say, a little bit of an oversaturation of Merkborg a little bit. Some things started to feel a little bit samey. I backed a lot of projects, but this one felt a little bit different, and I backed this one right away. It says, stripped of your gear and left to rot, can you escape from the nightmare halls of Fatmu the Ninth's twisted prison? First, even just the art, right, for the cover is beautiful. The cover looks fantastic. But when you actually read the description of the adventure, it says, descending further into delirious madness, King Fatmu the Ninth is haunted by visions of mockery, crude men who belittle him, sorcerers toying with his mind, and heretics conspiring with powerful demons to overtake his throne. Attempting to regain a feeling of control, Fatmu imprisons everyone who seems a threat in his underground prison. Terrified traitors, aspiring necromancers, powerful demagogues, and even scum like you. And then it continues to go on. You're trapped within the depths of Schleswig, bordering the Valley of the Unfortunate Dead. Twisted by the very magic it now imprisons, populated by some of Fatmu's worst nightmares. Every nook has a statue glorifying the king's greatness, but the weirdness of the underground has corrupted them, and they now stand around as symbols of Fatmu's tragic downfall. Above ground, no one knows of this magical prison, or almost no one. Just that concept of being stuck in a deep, dark, dying world underground prison and having to kind of fight your way out, it kind of gives me a little bit of the vibes like you were talking about. Not quite battle royale, but definitely like a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, it's just you and all these other people. Not only are you having to try to escape, you're probably having to fight off all of these other people as well. So it's this kind of like deep, dark, just brutal prison break scenario surrounded by all these like crazy, potentially powerful prisoners. And that struck me immediately as just like a really, really fun, cool, kind of like almost like bottle episode kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely have, which I think it struck me too, because I looked over this a little bit earlier when you sent it to me. And yeah, the thing that stuck out to me that kind of plays into that too is under like different ways to play that segment of the page a little further down. It says play this 20 plus room dungeon after a tpg or as a funnel for your first time players or an adventure in your campaign before an inevitable Psalm 7-7 occurs. And I was thinking, you know, you're talking kind of about that like oversaturation thing with Morkborg, which I would definitely agree with. I think it sticks out a little more sometimes because Morkborg's visual style is so Morkborg's visual style that you feel it a little more. But I can't think, maybe it exists, but I can't think of a lot of zines I've seen that sell themselves as a funnel for Morkborg. Maybe that exists. I guess most of the time I see funnels lately, it feels like they've been more like old school essentials, those kind of things. So that stuck out to me as like you said, it would be very easy to do like a one shot bottle episode kind of version, but I think it's almost more exciting to be like your whole wing of the prison opens for some reason. And then you're playing as like 20 people doing full prison break, which that definitely does sound unique to me in the space.
Yeah, no, so I mean, the first adventure we ran on stream at least was Graves Left Wanting, and that builds itself as something to do after a TPK. You literally basically like rise from the dead to an extent in it. But as far as a funnel goes, I think with Merkborg, a lot of it, I mean, you start really like weak to an extent, like your stats are trash and you got like a femur on you. So I think a lot of people, you know, it's a relatively brutal game to start. So the concept of a funnel is, well, your character is probably going to die regularly anyway. But I think, like you said, I haven't seen a lot of funnels, and I think this whole concept lends itself really, really well, because if your character dies, the next cell just opens up and you have like another character that comes out of it. And I love funnel adventures. Like when I was first running D&D, I wrote this like Dark Sun funnel adventure in my head before I knew what a funnel adventure was, thinking I'd created something interesting. And then I was like, and then I heard what a funnel adventure was, and I was like, oh, this has existed longer than I've been alive. That's cool. But yeah, I think Merkborg and this specific type of setting really lends itself well to that idea, and it does seem like a really, really cool and a really interesting way to play it, along with the not just that, but also, you know, play it after TPK, play it as one shot, giving a bunch of different options of the playstyle is a really, really smart way to create the product.
Yeah, and the cover, like you said, sticks out too. There's been, I can't remember what, there was another project, I think it was a Zine Month one, for Morkborg that I also had. I do like that cover art. I like that some people are moving, like I said, a little bit out of that like totally tried and true style a little. Like the cover is more like ornate, very detailed, more like high res metal album than the like sloppy paint and charcoal kind of thing, you know, like of the original. And I think it's interesting when people do stuff that still feels like it's in the same, you know, like thematic wheelhouse, but it's like, well, let's go to the opposite end. What if all the art was like, you know, I could see someone eventually doing something cool with like 3D generated art, in Morkborg or something. Anytime someone goes beyond just what that first book looks like, I think is always interesting.
Well, that's one reason we really like, and to rep another guy real quick, is Christian Eichhorn stuff, is he really took that Merkborg style and kind of made it his own, you know, where it's still like visually, you know, you can tell it's Merkborg, but, you know, they took it in a direction that they made it their own, especially with the number of projects that they put out. And this one kind of feels, at least from the pages that we can see, at least a little bit similar. Like, obviously, you know, some of the stuff is, you know, it's going to keep that same like Johan graphic nor like style, but, you know, especially with like the picture, the art for like the cannibal chef on it, you know, that's a page, that's a spread that you wouldn't really see in a lot of Merkborg adventures. So this one, like I said, it stuck out a little bit. It's one that I definitely backed right away. Like you said, it's got more of like that, you know, death metal cover on it. It's got some variations in the style while still staying true to the core of the, you know, the kind of art punk style of Merkborg. And then even just the adventure itself seems like something, you know, maybe just a little bit different than has been done before too, as opposed to a supplement or just an adventure within the dying world. So it's really cool. I don't know what DKK is as far as I think it's the creator is Danish, so I assume that's their currency over in the Danish lands. But you can start here with, let's go down here, for just $2. You get the eternal gratitude of the creator. For $10, you can get the PDF. For $18, you can get the physical zine and the PDF. For $25, you can get all of that plus the limited edition map. And then there was a reward with 4 backers for about $100-ish to play in a game with the creator. And that's all gone. So what you can get right now for $25 is the physical zine, the PDF, and a limited edition map, which is what I went with. So yeah, it's a great looking project. It still has a bunch of time to go on it. It's unlocked a bunch of different stretch goals here. As far as more quests, more creators attached to the project, deluxe printing, a Dark Fort version, and then soon will be a print of a solo game included once they hit 5,500 DKK, and they are currently sitting at this says 39,000 DKK. Maybe that's US dollars, so 5,500. So I feel like with 9 days to go, they'll probably at least get to the solo printing, which will be really, really cool. A lot of games lately have been creating like solo game versions. Like Diego was just talking about his solo print version. And that's really cool. I think there has been a blow up in solo games, especially after, well, you know, the pandemic, and Wretched and Alone really helped kind of expand that content, as well as Dark Fort, which was originally a solo game as well. So again, this project looks really cool. It's got about 9 days left, so it'll finish on August 8th, and that's Trapped Within, a Merkborg zine on Kickstarter. The other one that I wanted to talk about today is interesting. It's called Helgard: Curse of Kana, a tabletop role-playing game of infernal fantasy, complete with 5 single-night adventures and tools to create others. So this is a role-playing game of gothic fantasy. The story of it is that the game focuses on the land of Kana, a continent buried in the long shadow of an infernal war that twisted the landscape and warped the hearts of its people. Villages scraped by the edges of barren wilderness, ignorant of the supernatural evil that walks the street. Ancient apocrypha ripped from the tongues of tortured saints portend that hell will wage a new war on humanity from the shadows, but against the specter of annihilation stand the few damned souls within the power, with the power and the will to save the world from its tragic self. So anyone that knows me knows I like deep, dark, grimdark, edgelord bullshit. I'll back it all day, you know. And this, I mean, this is that. My qualms on this is, and I think this is, I don't know if you feel how I feel. We can talk about that a bit. Is if you go to like the team of people associated with this, there's like 20 something people, and it's a bunch of really big names within, I'll say mostly the D&D sphere. I mean, Ed Greenwood, B. Dave Walters, Nora Ibrahim, I mean, Richard Lee Byers. Whenever I see that, you know, especially, and this is not saying that this is out by any stretch, a lot of the other times I've seen projects like that, it's been like Asunder or something like that. And anyone who knows that project and the people associated with and the fallout that happened after that studio, it gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit, in that this is the first game that this publishing company has put out. I actually dug into their LLC a little bit. They used to be named something else. They trademarked Helgard in 2020, and over the last 2 years, it appears, have been behind the scenes getting all of these big names attached to this project. And not only that, like Monster Fight Club, Campaigns Coins, Level Up Dice. And my question with projects like this, and why, even though I did back it gives me the heebie-jeebies, is like, where did this come from? Where did the initial funding for this come from? What's the intent behind this? And is this gonna be just like, is this gonna be a good game, or is it like a bunch of names slapped onto a thing and it makes a bunch of money and then they disappear? You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of stuff that kind of struck me. Yeah, like put the alarm bells up on that stuff. That's the component of it, right? Like, I think depending on how into video games you are, right, the video game, that's like a big thing for me, is like paying way too much attention to the video game industry over the last decade. But it reminds me a lot of Kingdoms of Amalur, when that was like Todd McFarlane is the lead artist and R.A. Salvatore is the lead writer. And then that first game came out, it was supposed to be an MMO, it like imploded there. You know, it wasn't like it was their to fault. It was either of their fault or anything, but it ended up being sort of a big mess that was this huge buildup of this, like, you know, this is going to be 20 years of stories in this, and it kind of fell apart. So I know what you mean about that, like inorganically plucking people is kind of what it feels like. Did they all know each other and want to work on this? Was it one person's idea? Was it I would say the thing that struck me from the Kickstarter page itself is it feels almost like, you know, AI designed it for Kickstarter. It looks like a board game box and is very much like sort of published as a board game. It looks like it has the big minis that everything on Kickstarter has. And I personally just don't like, not that I don't like the minis, I just normally am not like a mini painter type person. So you know, and it's also like, but it's also a role-playing game, but then some of the keywords are a little weird, where they're, you know, it says like, it's saying it's a rules light role-playing game, but it's given me like a 400-page book. But then also it looks like all the characters are pre-gened. So yeah, it looked like I couldn't get a feel of maybe what it's going to do to differentiate itself, or what it's going to do particularly well. But it does look very well produced, if that makes sense. It kind of reminds me of Descent, if you've ever played that board game from Fantasy Flight. It's the same thing of like light role playing on top of like a board game dungeon crawl, or like Gloomhaven. It's probably
yeah. Well,
similar one.
I mean, but Gloomhaven presents itself as like a big ass fucking board game. Like it never says it's not anything else. This one, it's got a lot of buzzwords, you know, and even if you read through it, it says that they brought on Kickstarter specialists. I'm like, you can tell, like you can tell.
Yes.
It's got,
like I said, it feels like we made a Venn diagram of 3 things that are popular now or fund well, and in the middle,
that's what you try to make
the dart, which doesn't necessarily mean that it, you know, it won't be good, of course, no. But you know, like normally I feel like you can tell that this is a passion project versus this is something that really talented people are going to make, but it's sort of targeted in that way.
Yeah, I mean, even if you read it, I mean, again, as I read this, like as soon as you see the cover, you're like, okay, cool. But then as you read it, like I said, buzzwords. It's inspired by Diablo, Castlevania, Call of Cthulhu. I mean, those aren't all the same things. And other dark, fantastic worlds. And then it says Helgard blends horrific investigation with anime-inspired combat. I'm like, so we got anime-inspired combat with Call of Cthulhu and Castlevania and Diablo. I mean, those aren't. I mean. You know, if you're trying to blend all that, okay, we'll see how it goes. You know, Helgard blends mounting suspense of horrific investigation with the thrill of anime-inspired combat. I mean, again, I feel like someone just sat down and goes, "What are the buzzwords in the world in the world right now?" Yeah. And anime, of all the things on here, I'm like, you kind of had me, and then you're like, anime. What is anime-inspired combat? You know what I mean?
I almost screenshotted like that part when I was looking at this last night to just be like that little call out kind of made me like chuckle as I was reading it, because. Yeah, like you said, I don't know what anime-inspired combat is, and I've watched a lot of anime, but I've also seen all sorts of combat in anime. Like, what exactly do you mean? Exactly. I think they mean like fast-paced, stylish. I think that they mean like it's gonna have Devil May Cry kind of combat. That's what I assume if someone says anime-inspired combat, they mean. Because I'm like, do you mean I'm going to sit for 5 rounds and charge my spirit bomb? Because that's also anime-inspired combat, right?
Very true. So they do. One of the things that I you know looked at right away is, you know, as soon as I saw this, I was like, it's probably 5e. It's probably 5e. And
I thought that too, which I was actually surprised that it wasn't.
Well, especially with the number of people that are attached to 5e. So though I looked up, they actually have like eventually as you get halfway down the page, it actually starts getting into the stuff a little bit. There is a section where you can download like a quick like rules preview. Basically it gives you got these 5 classes. You got the knight, you got the breaker, you got the shadow, you got the witch, you got the sage, and then you can click here for a rules preview, and it gives you the breaker class basically. So it's like 2 pages, and the core premise of the game, it's not 5e. It's basically it's like a 2 to 3 d6 roll for different things, and then there's also these ruin dice where like you can use abilities and stuff to push, and you roll ruin dice to try to continue to boost your roll or in other situations. And even if you succeed using the ruin dice, the ruin that adds to the ruin in the world and stuff. And I mean, like, it's not 5e, which is cool. It does feel, I mean, the rules are light. I'm curious what more there are to the rules, because if that's it, then it's very rules light. And you said it looks like a 400-page book. So what's all the content? And is it just all this extra stuff that you brought these extra people on to write like world lore for, or is there more to the game? And listen, I love me a good rules light game. But I'm just, like you said, it feels, if I had to say anything about this, I would say it feels overproduced.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels to me like it, which is not unique necessarily on Kickstarter. It's very much sort of like the whole realm of Kickstarter I tend to personally rarely back or not back, which is it's doing the thing where it wants to be the absolute peak final form of like the brand or the property when it's on Kickstarter. Like if you look at that ultimate box set for $80, it's like deluxe collector's box, hardcover rule book. You're going to get 5 battle maps made by this company. You're going to get a set of dice made by this other company. You're going to get a bunch of minis, like 8 minis, a bunch of tokens. You know, it's like they want to give you like the 5e. They want to give you the like, I want to go to the store and spend $200 on all the little baubles. But I don't know, as a person in this case, I'm like, I don't know that I even want to play just the book.
Right.
But I think that flash goes a long way in Kickstarter. I would say, like even you said earlier, having a cover that makes people want to back your thing goes a long way. So it's not necessarily something I can blame of someone, but for me, I'm always like, I don't know. Like I almost need a little more on why I would want to play this over other things, especially when they do throw out so many different, like Diablo and Call of Cthulhu are not the same at all.
Not even close.
Like not only are one a game, one's tabletop, one's a video game, but I mean like they're not the same game. Diablo's kind of grimdark, and Call of Cthulhu is cosmic horror. It's very slow. It's very like studious. You should never fight. Diablo, you're always fighting. Yep. So that's the thing is like I at least going through the Kickstarter would have said, man, I would have loved a section that said, if you love this, maybe this is what we think we do. Like if you love Call of Cthulhu, this is how we appeal to that, but what we do better, or something. But it doesn't really have that. So to me, I'm kind of like, just have a few little alarm bells up, and then I'm like, it could be really cool, but I can't really tell from this.
Yeah, I mean, and then like I said, like it feels like the majority of the page is buzzwords. Like there's not, the page is a pretty big Kickstarter page, but doesn't really tell you anything. Like it gives you a rules preview, which is like 2 pages long, but like nothing really about the rules in the game beyond those. Like literally, it basically just tells you how to do basically an ability check and how ruin dice work. Gives you a preview of one character, and that's about it. But it never says. And then it talks about. The other thing for me is like it appeals to both board game players and RPGers, and I'm like, is that your goal? Is your goal to do that? Because they're not the same. Like when people call D&D a board game, I'm always like, now let me give you a 10-minute explanation on why it's not. But it feels, like I said, like it's all buzzwords, like board gamers and RPGers and Diablo and anime and this and that. It's dark, it's grimdark, and you can give it like the founders tier. Like this is going to be some like 20-year game that you're going to get forever, as opposed to probably just this one box set one time, and then it's just going to disappear. And here's the other thing too, because I know that I'm bagging on this pretty hard. I have no problem when I get this in hand coming back on the show and being like, I was wrong. This is really fucking cool. If it's really fucking cool. But as we both said, these kind of projects immediately send alarm bells up for their overproduction, their use of buzzwords. And this is their first project, and they've got all these people throwing all these things in from all these different places. And it really, to me at least, it feels like it's just a grab bag of stuff and buzzwords and things to get you to join into it. And it feels like, again, to me, that this is the kind of game that's going to spend a lot more time getting fancy names attached to it and getting special metal dice than giving you a really in-depth core rule book. So again, I'm happy to say that I'm completely wrong. I did back for the core book, so when I get it, we'll see how it goes. And I will revisit this in the future. So all you Hellguard people out there, we'll see, and feel free to reach out and say hi. But for now, I'm not going to talk shit without getting the product. I did back for the book, so we'll see how it goes. And that's where we're at. And that is Kickstart the podcast for this week. So, my opinion, something that seems really cool and something that could be, we'll see. And now we're going to get into the meat. Well, I think Diego was the meat of the episode, but we're going to get into actually reading through the game Primal Quest. Let me pull up that window real quick. And this is Primal Quest. As we've said a couple of times already, and we talked about, Christian and I actually got to play in Exalted Funeral Con. The I Know What You Rolled last summer. It was an online con using Gather, which was a cool kind of like pixel art, like almost video gamey space, which really I think lent to the like all the game people that you would get from EFCon. I think it really helped really well. So we actually got to play with Diogo. It was really great time, and now we'll actually read through the book. And here we go. So Weird Stone and Sorcery Adventure Game by Diogo Nogueira, Primal Quest Essentials. And again, to reiterate something we talked about a little bit earlier, this is the Essentials one. And what Diego said was this is the rules without really any explanation. And if I had any knock, especially prior to talking to Diogo, that was my knock, was there's some things that I don't understand because there's not a big explanation, and actually getting to play with them really help to understand. But not everyone gets to play with the creator of the game. So maybe they'll listen to us and we can explain some of the stuff to them. Yeah, so created by Diogo Nogueira. Amazing creator. I think that, again, he also, spoke very humbly about his body of work, which I think almost everybody in our scene knows his art and his games. And this one, I think, is just going to continue on with that legacy. Starting with the preface, I'm not going to read this by the book. But basically, it talks about what Diego talked about, his love of dinosaurs, where the inspiration for this came from. Primal inspirations right here. It says, if you steal from one another, it's plagiarism. If you steal from many, it's research. And he believes art is collaborative. And as we talked about, there's a lot of facets to this game, a lot of things pulled from other games that are put together in a really well done way. I think that makes it like a really, really fun, interesting game.
Yeah, I really love the thing that I loved reading through this prior to this was I really like the preface aspect of it. I feel like I don't see that enough. I like that. I feel like a lot of creators feel like it's hard to break out of that. Like you're trying to emulate a very professional thing, and like everything about this book like looks great and professionally done and everything. But I really like just having one page that's just like, hey, I made this game. This is why I wanted to make it. And I think it's cool. Like I almost wish I heard more of that in other things, or it made me think like, man, maybe when I make my own game, like I should just put like a little letter in there where I get to say what I like. I also really like that it has a full page of like inspiration across like everything, which I think is really cool. I always like that in games anyway, when they give you kind of like, hey, this is like the music I listened to while I worked on it. These are the movies I watched. But this is like a big list. And as someone who doesn't have a ton of experience, I have more experience with the idea of the pulpy, I'm a caveman riding a triceratops and we're going to war with aliens, than I have actual experience with it. It's very cool to be like, oh, I have a list of like, I have 8 books I could read right now to like keep immersing myself in this, or I've got like 10 movies I could watch right now. So I do really like those 2 pages.
Yeah, it's a great page. Like you were saying, there's a literature section, there's a comic section, there's a movie section, a TV series, games, and RPGs. And one of the things I love here on the show is hyperlinks. And there's no table of contents in this because really, I mean, outside the adventure, it's really only like 8 pages long. So it doesn't really need one as much. But all of the RPGs listed here, Fire and Stone, Bone Age, Pariah, Cortex, Genesis, all of the links here are hyperlinked. So which is really cool to see. Here, see how it turns into a hand? See? So we love a good hyperlink here on the show, so that's really cool, especially to link the other RPGs since this is an RPG. So that was really, really cool to see. And I'm going to actually scroll real quick all the way to the back because I want to talk about this right at the start. Here, written by Diogo Nogueira, edited by Wayne Canepa, graphic design by Guilherme Gontijo, and the graphic design in this is absolutely stunning. They've done a bunch of other stuff, and it's beautiful. They do a really, really amazing job. The map by Fernando Savatera, which we'll get to see, and then the illustrations by Felipe Faria. I wanted to talk about those people right off the bat because, my goodness, it, like you said, it's really well done zine. It looks beautiful, and the art all the way through, both the layout and the illustrations are stunning. They keep a really consistent style. It's incredibly readable. I love anytime there's like just a whole page piece of art. It's great to fill empty spaces, but when we get to this page right after the list of inspirations, and it's just this huge like red, black with this spots of white, with this tyrannosaur with spikes all over it, with these cavemen with femurs and spears. It's just a stunning illustration. And I love that it's almost all red with the pops of white as opposed to white with like the pops of red. It really keeps the cover and the consistency of the art just going through. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it has a lot of, it does vibe very well, which I think is not only something I just really like in games, but it's like a part that really, like you said, the rules here are, I think, 8 pages total, and if you took art out of that and stuff, less than that even. But it's like the vibe that a book can bring is like such a big part of like my inspiration to make something for it, to get it to the table as quick as possible. We talked about like Morkborg, Mothership, those things. I feel like those are other great examples of games that like bleed vibe, that just makes you go like, I know exactly what this is going for, even though it's still really open and I can kind of make anything. Because like the thing too that I really love about the art that you mentioned on that spread is the crater with like this strange totem coming out of it. What is that? It looks like a crater, like a meteor or something hit, but then there's like a odd sort of like squid shaped totem thing coming. Like I just, that vibe is very cool to me. Just to even start with the cover being like there's a triceratops and a caveman, so we know this is not a historical simulation of being a caveman. This is like pulpy caveman. And then when you get to more of that art, and even there's another piece I think on the next page of the caveman with he's like a cracked out ruined astronaut like vac suit helmet on. Yeah, just like those little touches to give you like, oh, I know exactly the kind of thing that we're going for. I'm going to be a caveman who for some reason has, like a modern item on them because it fell out of time or something.
And that's what the pulpy aspect of it too is such a good addition to the game. I mean, a lot of what we understand from, or at least the modern media and people's basic interpretation without really digging in of dinosaurs and cavemen and Neanderthals and like all the rest of this stuff is so inaccurate. It's so insanely inaccurate. So to not try to shoot for that at all, I think was an incredibly smart move. To go pulpy with it, to have humans or Homo sapiens and Neanderthals and whatever with dinosaurs at the same time, it immediately says, like you just said, like this is not archaeological, this is not historically accurate, it's just a fun game with people and dinosaurs and that's it. So I think that was a really smart move to steer away from any type of historical accuracy and just dig into the inspirations in the given media. So continuing into this, it says, what will you find here? It's a streamlined D6 rule system that gives you degrees of success, additional consequences, and narrative control with a single die roll, which we talked about before and we'll talk about as we continue to go. Character creation rules that are quick, intuitive, and incredibly flexible. Rules for resource management, encumbrance, combat and healing rules, an open magic system, and rules for making the game easy to run, improvise, and fun for the referee. The main world here is the Primal World of Theia, Thaia. It is being developed side by side. The Primal Quest is with the Primal World of Theia, a zine for old school Weirdstone and sorcery adventure. And I think Diego was talking about that a little bit earlier. And a lot more hyperlinks and things here. I love that there's like a QPR code here. I love that if you click on this download link, it takes you directly to character sheets. I mean, one of the things Diego was talking about was just like making things easily accessible for players and creators and everything like that. And the zine itself, not only by having the hyperlinked link here on the PDF, but the QPR code. Anyone that just turns on their camera on a modern phone, it'll just read the QPR code and take them directly to it. So it's here. It's on the inside of the back. I think it's on the very back cover. It's all over the place. So it's impossible not to see the accessibility within the game, which is fantastic to see.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big proponent of that and stuff that I create myself too. Not only just making things like character sheets and stuff useful, but it's like, yeah, I feel like typically, well, yeah, the physical edition does come with the character sheets on like tear offable a little pad, which is really awesome, and I have not seen it in a game. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing that, since I've been in the space, at least, that I find is it's like all as a creator, I feel like you want to do is that like make it easy for people to play your thing. And most of the time, the people who support you are going to support you in that. So I think just making like, don't hide your assets. Don't like make that stuff accessible because you want people to play. Don't be like, well, no, you got to log into your account on like Exalted Funeral to download the character sheet, because like, like all that sort of very protective DRM-y kind of feeling thing makes me, I always don't like. So I like it when it's just like this. It's like, I'll just link you to a Dropbox or Google Drive. Here you go. Yeah. Here's all the digital stuff you'd ever want, because you bought, I'm going to assume the best in you, basically.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, again, the difference between kind of like bigger, like games that have like a company behind them versus a lot of indie games. And I think even more and more indie games are getting to do this too, is just like, you're going to get more free promotion by other people doing things with your game than you're ever going to be able to get with just you and your game. So giving people accessibility to create things and put out as much as they want will get more eyes on the original content than anything you could possibly do. And Diogo talked about Mothership and Merkborg. I know Mothership, when 1E was dropping throughout all of Zemo and all those projects, the Mothership community, like they were giving them all the 1E stuff months, like probably a year before we're ever going to see it, so that all of their stuff was compatible, which was fantastic for the creators and for us in turn as well. And Merkborg, I mean, at this point, Merkborg, not only could you play it for free before, because like they have like a ton of adventures and supplements and everything free directly on their website, including the third-party license and downloadable versions of the logos that you can use right off the bat. But now they just dropped and you could get the original like 2-page spread of the core rules, like just the very simplified rules. The entire game is now completely free for you to use in a black and white, basically art-free version. So you could spend not 1 cent and play Merkborg and have a million adventures and supplements and every single rule you need for the game. And it's huge. I mean, it completely, there's like pre-Merkborg and post-Merkborg as far as I'm concerned, in a lot of in the indie scene, kind of with the way that it changed the way a lot of people do art and the games and stuff in general. And that is just them putting it out there for people to use and to do that. So with Diego being like, well, the community behind Mothership, the community behind Merkborg, that's what I'm shooting for. This is the way to do it. And I think he's doing a really great job with it.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the digital version of this is just pay what you want title on itch. So if you just search Primal Quest, you can just get it for free already, which I think, especially at this stage of like, if he has grander plans for it, of making a big hardcover book, a box set, that kind of thing, this feels very like the ideal time. You get people in early, they have a lot of fun with it, and then when that bigger next steps come, you're like, you already have some evangelist type people. Like, I mean, even just from us playing the game at EFCon, I was like, on my private Discord with friends, I was like, I gotta figure out a time for us to play this. I'm dying to run more of it. That kind of thing. I want to, before we actually dig into the rules proper, I did want to mention too, the thing that I think is kind of interesting compared to sort of other games overall in the space is, and Diogo mentioned it as being about like 75% there. The primal world of Thea, however I assume that's how you pronounce it, Thea, zine aspect is pretty interesting to me, I think, because it seems like a way to sort of bridge the gap between the anti-canon idea that like Mothership has, a lot of other indie games have, of like, we build setting through like tables and the items and the things like that, but you're not going to have like a Forgotten Realms style lore. There's no this one place that exists in everyone's world, or this is how the thing works. And I feel like this feels like a good middle ground to that, of being like, hey, we're going to put out free supplemental zines that are sort of like Diogo's world. This is like a world that they're going to build and develop without it being so cooked in to the game that you leave reading it going, oh, I have to read the 200-page lore section before I'm really going to be able to run it. Because I know at least that kind of baggage bothers me. It's why I don't run things that are in really established like IPs and stuff very often. Like I'm always like, I don't know enough details about Star Wars to like run the Star Wars game. My friend who's super into Star Wars does that, because what if someone says, what about this? And I go, I don't know the exact Star Wars version. So this feels like a good way to be like, I want to build like my world and build that out without it being like it's required reading for everyone. So I'm interested to see how that develops as it goes, because that's different. Like Tuesday Night Games doesn't have, they have some first party adventures, but they don't really have one world. Like they're different, you know, Dead Planet and Pound of Flesh. Those are very different styles, themes, places. They don't really feel necessarily like they inhabit the same universe. So I'm interested to see how that aspect of it grows, of sort of keeping the world building separate from the book.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that. I like, you know, I prefer, and I know through some of the games we've talked about here on the show, like I've said, like I like lore. I'm a lore guy, and I like a little bit, you know, and even part of that speaks to like the author's intention. Like what world were you trying to make with this? Like, what did you want us to do with this? So I really like having some lore. But the problem that I have, especially if there's too much, is that I will hunt for the very, very, very specific part because I want the true part. So when I was writing some 5e stuff, I was digging through like dozens of like Dragon magazines to find the one issue that had the one bit about that one devil in the Nine Hells, originally written by the original author of it, trying to find, like, because I know it exists. You know, I even wrote campaigns in the Underdark that I used, you know, NPCs from novels written in the exact year because I had to. I was like, well, if it's before this year, then this is different. If it's after this year, this is different. So what year is it? And then how do I get all of the stuff for that? So if there's too much, you know, for me at least, it feels burdensome in that I feel like I have to be super true to it. But if there's just enough to give you ideas and a core or a base to work with, then that's fantastic. And I think that's what he's going. Diego's actually still in chat with us today, and he said a couple of things. Primal Quest Essentials PDF and text will always be free. They want to provide a base for the game to play from, and that's in relation to the Primal World of Thea. Nothing encyclopedic, just tools for you to make it your own. And then the base details, themes, plus tools and tables for you to run to make it useful at the table, which is exactly what we were just talking about. Like enough to make it useful and fun and a core to grow from, but not encyclopedic, you know? So yeah. So getting into the game itself, the last bit is safety tools, which we talk about a lot here on stream. It's great to have. There's a link here to entire ttrpg safety toolkit, which is fantastic. It's always, I mean, we encourage 0 sessions. We encourage the use of safety tools if it's necessary for your table. So it's great that there's a link here to a lot of other resources. And I think the idea of like putting a link to somewhere else is a really good idea, because I've seen a lot of zines take up a whole page or two with the safety tools. And this, especially if you're trying to keep, you know, the page count down a little bit, is a good idea, is to just link it to something else outside of the zine itself. The only problem, I guess, with that is the link only works if you're using the PDF. This isn't really going to work on in the print copy. So, but getting into actually playing the game now. So again, and I want to stress this when we start, this is the essentials. So this is the bare bones, super core version of the rules without a lot of explanation for the rules. And one of the things, especially one of the reasons I wanted to play in it, aside from getting to play Primal Quest, which sounded awesome with Diogo Nogueira, was to get some clarification on some of the rules, because on the first read through this, it was a little bit, I was like, I don't quite understand how this works. And then getting to play it, it made a little bit more sense. So we'll try to explain some of those bits as we go through. So playing the game, whenever characters are in a situation where the outcome is uncertain and also impactful on the narrative, a test is made, which is the very, like, you know, modern OSR thing. Don't roll if you don't have to roll. So tests, as we talked about a little bit earlier, you roll a pool of positive dice, or PD, and negative dice, ND. You always roll at least one of each and may earn positive dice or negative dice as explained below. So to reiterate, a core with no extras, no nothing, just a core test in the game, you always roll 2d6. One is a positive die, one is a negative die, period, no matter what else is added on or subtracted. So, and then the way the test works is you subtract the highest negative dice from the highest positive dice to start right there. So there's not, you don't take the highest from the lowest, it's the highest positive. So you have to separate the positive from the negative, and then you get a number, and then you add the attribute, obtaining a result. You don't add a number of dice equal to your attribute or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's 2d6, one is positive, one is negative, subtract the negative from the positive, get the result, add the attribute. You compare the result to the difficulty. If it is equal to or greater than the difficulty, it is a success. If it is lower than, it is a failure. So it's 2d6 rolled over, dice pool, subtract lowest from highest.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. When I first read it, I was like, this sounds like it could get gamey, but it doesn't.
Yeah, I would say it sounds a little crunchier than I think it ended up being in practice, because having that, you're just quickly identifying the pool for, I'm looking for sixes basically. Okay, cool. I got a positive 6, and then my highest negative is a 4. When we play it, I rolled like physical dice, and I have a bunch of black d6s and a bunch of white d6s, and those are my positive and negatives. So keeping that stuff separated, as long as you have some d6s around, isn't hard. The thing that I think is also cool there about having, like you said, there are some games that have your attribute adds dice to the pool. I'm thinking like the Tales from the Loop, those kind of free league games, I know do something similar to that. The thing I like about the adding it after is the way that I guess we'll get into it a little bit more, but the way that the test is resolved is kind of, hey, if the difficulty is 1, how much above 1 were you? That's how much better or more critically you succeed. That means that your attribute is like very powerful, which is cool, because having like a +3 is like, that's big. Because if you rolled a 6 and your negative was a 5, that only gets you a 1. And if it's a difficulty like 4 thing, you could still have succeeded with a 3, because like having that tack on to the end, or it like means you could do wild damage in one hit. If you get lucky on the roll, you succeed by 5 points, you add 3 on top of that. Now you're doing like 18, like it combos well with the rest of the rolls. I feel like it makes the attributes feel weighty, despite the number of after the attribute being low. It's like your bonus is +1 or +3. It isn't +10 or 15 or whatever.
Right. Well, that's one thing I love about 2d6 systems too, is like you just said, like hitting the math a little bit, and I'm not a math guy, on a 2d6 roll, especially if you're using, because this doesn't use like the standard PBTA mixed success 7 to 9, all that kind of stuff. But say in that kind of system, a +3 gives you a 75% chance of getting a 10 or higher when you roll 2d6 and add them together. So, but that is very different math than this. And one thing that I haven't seen very often, and like I said, I only really saw it once previously with Adam Vass, and maybe there are a bunch of others. The math when you subtract a d6 from a d6 is completely different than when you add a d6 and a d6. And actually, the average roll mathematically, when you subtract a d6 from another d6, is 0. Because statistically, the highest possibility is that you roll 2 of the same dice. And then when you are creating these dice pools, with the higher number being the better number for positives, if you got 5 of each, the odds of you rolling a 6 or a 5 is really high. So if you subtract a 5 from a 5 or a 6 from a 6 and get 0, then your attribute is really what it all comes down to. And like you just said, it makes your attribute feel really, really important. If you only have a 1, you really hope that you got a bonus to the roll, or somehow your negative dice is a little bit lower, your pool is much smaller. But all of the math associated with just the negative, just a d6 minus the d6 has always been really interesting to me. But when you throw dice pools on top of it, it expands it, exponentially in really interesting ways. So it's cool. It's really fun. It plays a lot differently than I thought when I first read it, and I think it's done incredibly, incredibly well. One of the things that the zine has that I really like is underneath all of these things, test, difficulty, effect, there's always this red slash across it that gives you kind of like a math equation for it. Like the result equals positive dice minus negative dice plus attribute. It's cool to see it in that way. It doesn't help my brain because I did not do good in algebra. But it's cool to see it in that way, just to see it written out in a different way that people might understand a little bit better, if that's how their brain works. Moving on from the basic core test is difficulty. So normally determined by a stat possessed by the target or opposing force, their attribute, defense, level, or something else. Difficulty 0 is the default if nothing is mentioned, which, as I said, generally the average of a d6 minus a d6 will be a 0. Difficulty 0 is the default if nothing is mentioned. Difficulty of +1 or higher is considered difficult and usually requires a test, and difficulty below 0 is usually considered too easy to require a test. And there's multiple levels of difficulty. The moderate difficulty is 1 to 2, and that's what's crazy to me. Immediately, a moderate difficulty is 1, as a result of a 1 on rolling 2d6, which I think
or
a lot
actually
of people
hard difficulty, right? Or at least mine says moderate is 0, and then hard is 1 to 2.
Oh, that's, I mean, yes. So it's not a little circle denoting a section. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's even more what you were saying, which is that hard is 1. All I got to beat is a 1 for hard. Yeah.
Right. And then 3 to 4, very hard, 5 daunting, and 6+ legendary. I mean, to get a 6+ with the way that the dice roll out with the pools and stuff like that would be almost difficult. Yeah. Yeah. See, reading numbers wrong. That's the math brain going. But yeah, a moderate difficulty is literally a 0. Like moderate difficulty. Like anything less than moderate, you don't even roll for, because just getting a 0 is difficult already. So it can be a pretty brutal game and very low. Your numbers are going to seem low, even though you add, like, you're going to roll like 12 dice and get a 0, which is interesting.
That's why I like that, is because it's fun to roll a lot of dice, but systems that make that dice reading take too long and the like arithmetic angle of it take too long is not as nearly as fun as getting to roll a lot. And this is like, you get to roll a lot, but you can really quickly look at it and be like, cool, I get a 2. I succeed.
See, now I have a different mindset too. Like I'm okay not rolling a ton of dice. So like I'm playing around with this game on the side that I'll probably never put out anywhere. But I actually have the least number of rolls possible. Like damage, just a flat number automatically. It's 2d6. If you hit, you hit, and you get the amount of damage that you get, and that's about it. So I like dice pools. For me, there's some cool games that do dice pools. Like I really like Spencer Campbell's, like all the Lumen games and things like that, where you do dice pool. But it's never really spoke to me in that way until I played it this way. I really like the way that it comes out this way, and definitely gave me kind of a different perspective on dice pools. But yeah, so this is one thing that I had to talk to Diego after. I had one question really after we ran the game, and he clarified a little bit. But the effect. So effect is determined by subtracting the difficulty from the result. This specifically gets to be a little bit. This gets a little bit mathy and fiddly for me. I think once I understood it too. Effective 0 or higher is a success. The higher the number, the more accomplished the success. And an effect below 0 is a failure. The lower the number, the worse the failure. So I talked to him a little bit, and I think it's a weird way to write it, in that you've already succeeded or failed prior to the effect existing. So we're having it written as like a success and fail state seems a little bit odd to me, as more of like, since it's more of like a bonus or like a plus minus. If you look through the entire PDF, the only time effect is used is the difference. The effect is basically like the result, minus difficulty, is for some like damage bonuses and things like that. So writing it as like a success or failure state versus just like a bonus or like a subtraction made me like really not understand it on the first read. And even when we get to effect later and how it affects armor and stuff like that, I'm not sure if Diego was using it in the background when he did some stuff, but it didn't feel like it came up very often, at least from the player's perspective. And I don't know if you felt that.
Yeah, I think that it feels like probably one of the parts in this that could most use that, eventually fleshing it out and giving like an example, like a list of example of play, that kind of thing. My takeaway from it was that if I'm running the game, I'm going to use it sort of as a grades of success or failure. I guess so. If they're trying to attack an enemy and the effect is 4, which means they beat the difficulty to see if they hit the enemy by 4. I'm going, I will narrate that a little more amped up. I think specifically in combat, it means they would actually do more damage and that kind of thing too. But sort of like, even like those out of damage skills, I kind of use it. My takeaway is that I would use it to grade how well they do it. So if you're trying to, jump across the big open chasm or whatever, I would say, if they get an effect of 3, I'm like, you get a running start, you just sail over. Like everybody else is kind of like surprised by how easily you did it. Whereas if it's difficulty 0 and they hit 0, they're catching their chest on the edge and just holding on, pulling themselves up. But yeah, we don't see necessarily how mechanically it hits a ton. I do think there's potential for it to be used in the adventure making step, because I think it could be fun to have opponents and stuff and puzzle like traps, those kind of things, like environmental things, where if you succeed by an effective 4+, the adventure writer is giving you a specific bonus, like this component falls out and now they have more equipment going forward, or that kind of thing. But yeah, right here it's definitely a little undercooked, I guess, in the PDF form.
Yeah, and when I talked to Diego after the game, we were talking on Instagram as we were kind of setting him coming up on the show, and even in chat right now, that's exactly what the intention is. And after playing the game and then talking to him, it makes total sense. I think like maybe wording it slightly differently, but as I said, like right at the beginning, like that was one of the things about as we're doing this read through, is some things might be a little bit unclear because it is just supposed to be like the essentials, the core, no real explanation, no examples of play, just the bare minimums. So and this is one of those examples where, in a more expanded format, if there is eventually like a big core rulebook, I can only imagine that this is one of the things that Diogo would expand on a little bit, give an example of, and things like that, and it'd make it a little bit more readable. But as we said, since it is the core, just listen to us and we'll explain it to you. But like you said, that is exactly the intention. It's gradients of success or gradients of extra damage and things like that. And I think that's really clever. This is another one of those parts that I think would take a second to wrap your brain around and have to do once or twice, because it's like deriving a number from a number you already rolled that gave you different numbers, so on top of your result, which used kind of the difficulty and stuff already, you use that again to give you this other number, which I really enjoy the kind of like nitty gritty a little bit of it, but giving it that kind of gradient and that potential narrative aspect and things like that, I think really is a really clever way to use it. And as I said, when it expands the explanation a little bit, I think it, like you said, it opens up a lot of options for writers and for the narrator too.
Yeah, and I think expanding, like focusing on making sure you stick to that procedure, probably as the person running the game, at least thinking of groups I typically play with, would probably be helpful. Like it was really helpful for us playing something like Blades in the Dark. Like I need to make sure I'm always telling you your effect, that also has effect and risk or whatever the different things are. Like in this, I would want to make sure at the beginning, like, okay, let's break down the tags. Okay, so you're going to do 4 positive dice, 3 negative dice. This is a difficulty 2. Go ahead and roll, right? Then they roll. Then we all know all the numbers, so then the math is very simple. Whereas I could see it being a little clunky if you run it just like D&D. Okay, give me a roll, and you don't know what they're rolling or what you're rolling, or then at the end they go, well, wait, what's the difficulty? Okay, difficulty's 3. Well, if difficulty was 3, I would have done something else, or so it has like 3 simple steps, but I think I would probably try to run that procedure fairly structured every time we roll at the table, just to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is the core structure of the entire game, so like getting to reinforce that and stuff like that would be really important. And even having it on like the GM screen so people can see it all the time, or like right on the sheet, is really cool too. Diego, as we were talking about this, had some things to say. That was the intention. It'll be more detailed in Essentials 2.0. It's going to be used as something like a table of effects and degrees of success, and for extended actions. For example, it's the amount you add to say like build a reinforced hut. That may take, they need 10 effects, so they make tests and add the effect to craft it. So this little tiny like 3-line thing has the potential to be like a huge usage across the entire system. Yeah, basically, yeah, an entire subsystem within the game in a very like streamlined way. So moving on to extra positive and negative dice. So again, like you're building a dice pool system on top of your base, always 1 positive, 1 negative d6. You can get these extra positive and negative dice. So you can receive more positive dice on rolls to roll on tests if you invoke a pertinent tag to your advantage. The tag can be your own, from a piece of gear, from the environment, or from an opponent. You can have some tactical advantage, such as attacking from higher ground, flanking an opponent, or debating against someone whose notes you perused. Anything else the referee thinks benefits a character in that circumstance. So we talked about one of the things we got early on. I can't remember the name for it. Enhanced senses. I think it was something like that. So when things were, and it was dark, or if we needed to see far away, because we had this tag that we all got, these enhanced senses, we actually got to add a d6 to a lot of rolls, where normally if it was like completely dark or if something was too far away, we might not get to add that. So that was something we all kind of got, is just a base positive die. So that's one example of how you can add to a positive die. Or, you know, like if you're trying to go over a chasm, and using a spear is almost like a pole vault, you might get an extra d6. And Diogo even talked about it. We talked about a little bit during the interview. Is it's a system where you could try to like bullshit your way into more dice. It's just like, well, but I have this, or I have this extra piece of gear, and remember I did this over here, and you just be like, okay, sure, add another d6, or you try to really finagle every way, every advantage you could possibly get out of the situation, narratively and mechanically, to give you as big a positive dice pool as possible and as small a negative dice pool as possible.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing that's interesting about it is that that stuff is fun. And when we get to the character creation, like, you know, you have a concept, talent, motivation, relationship, and those are just like open. Those are like, you write whatever you want in there. So those tags feel very specific to your character. Like you could be like, no, my guy's like the scout I'm the messenger for the tribe. So I would be very good at running long distance. That's like what my guy's thing is. But you don't have to have like skill athletics, right? It's like, no, in this specific case, it works because my character does that. But the thing that I think works well too with the math that you mentioned earlier on the dice pool is you're getting to, and why I think that like BSing element of it is fun rather than feeling like metagamey, is because adding a dice to the pool is not nearly the equivalent of gaining advantage in D&D. Right. Like if you like imagine playing like something like 5e where you're never going to roll, like if you rolled 5 d20s, you're succeeding, right? Guaranteed, almost on anything, right? So in this, it's like they're little bonuses that feel good, but they don't throw the math off. It doesn't mean like, you know, if you BS'd I've got my spear, that means I can long jump a little better, and the ref was being nice and gave it to you. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed to succeed, I guess, the way some reroll type mechanics can in other systems. And I like that part of it too.
Yeah, and I mean the thing too is the bigger your positive and negative pools are, the more likely you are to get 5s or 6s in both, which just fades out to a 0 plus your attribute. Again, going back to your attributes being really important, but also those 6s, both positive and negative, and we'll get to it in just a second, like adds more to the narrative situation that you're in too, because you get boons or setbacks, which we'll get to after the negative dice. So the more pools you get, both positive and negative, actually, it's not necessarily a bigger chance of success or failure as much as a bigger chance of getting these boons and setbacks that actually add to the narrative of the turn that you're doing, which is fun.
I'm happy to read, by the way, if you don't have to be reading this whole thing.
Oh yeah, I'll go through the negative dice and then we'll switch to the boons and setbacks. So the negative dice, receiving more negative dice to roll on tests when there's a tag that applies negatively to the situation, either from that character or the environment condition that they're suffering from. Some effects in the game impose additional negative dice, such as spells and powers, monster abilities, damage, or poorly crafted gear, and so on. So as we said, you want more positive than negative dice, but it's a dice pool system. You're going to get a little bit of both. So if you want to take boons and setbacks and continue on.
Yeah, so this is the kind of the element of this that I feel like starts to play into the more mixed success-y space, or like when we were talking to Diogo, talking about Genesis, specifically this part really reminded me of the Genesis games. But boons, when a character's PD comes up as a natural 6, they score 1 boon. Boons can be spent to generate benefits, apply an appropriate stat as an attribute, a weapons damage, and opponent's level to the test result, grant a positive die to their or another character's next test as long as it's justified narratively, which was a big thing, at least when we were playing. Impose a negative dice to an opponent's next test as long as it's justified narratively. Gain some insight about the circumstances, some other benefit that is independent of success or failure as long as the referee approves. And then setbacks are sort of the opposite version of that. So when someone's negative dice comes up as a natural 6, they score 1 setback. Setbacks can be spent by the referee to generate consequences. Apply an appropriate stat from the opposing side to the test result. provide a positive die to an opponent's next test, as long as it is justified narratively. So all these things are meant to be justified narratively. And it's kind of in Genesis, they have something called, I can't remember. It's sort of like advantages and disadvantages is what it's called in the Genesis game. But yeah, it's like results that can show on the dice that don't impact if you succeed or fail, because rolling those natural sixes on the positive or negative are separate, right, from you doing that final math to determine if you succeed or fail. But they it's like this tug of war where the players with the boons get to sort of shape the narrative and the specifics of the situation a little. And then the setbacks give the referee a chance to shape and twist the narrative a little. And those are almost always some of the most interesting rolls. Because say if it's difficulty 1, I hit 1, I didn't roll any 6s one way or the other, that's, okay, you jumped across the hole. That's not very exciting. Right. But if it's I just succeeded and I rolled a boon and 2 setbacks, that suddenly becomes probably a much more interesting scene then that the next roll is going into, because then that's like the person is going, oh, well, if I got a boon, like let's say that I pulled my rope out and I jumped across with the rope for me, so I have this rope, so I need to add a positive dice to the next player because they're going to have handhold that tag or whatever. Cool, but then the ref gets to make some setbacks as well. So I really like that element of it, but that's one that I think, depending on your experience with mixed success games, or that kind of narrative dice system from Genesis, I could see some people being like, I don't really know how to use it. And even like I said, even at first when we played, we weren't quite sure how far we could take it or not. But that might also just be different a little at every table.
I think so too. Yeah, because I love, the 2d6 core mixed success, that PBTA and like the post PBTA games use. I love it. I think it's my favorite rule set. I hate flat D20s. Every roll is a 5% chance, so it doesn't matter if you have +5 or not. On a 20, you could have twice the high a stat as anyone else at the table and still fail, and someone could have a 0 and still succeed because it's a 5% chance every single time. I always like rolling 2 dice because it gives you that bell curve, which is, generally you're gonna succeed-ish, and that 7 and 9 territory where you get that yes but is my favorite thing, and it creates so much narrative. This does it in a little bit different way. Again, it's 2d6, but with the subtraction, it really it puts it on different. And I think these boons and setbacks are really that situation here. Like, I know when we were playing the game, we got to a point where sometimes we were rolling like 4, 5, 6 positives and 3 or 4 negatives, and then statistically, I think just about every time, more times than not, you're gonna succeed. But right, like, sure, you did the thing and you have an attribute, because if you get a 6 and a 6, you got a 0. All you needed was a moderate or a hard difficulty of 1, so you succeed. But you got 2 boons and a setback, and like you said, you get to shape the situation. And like we said earlier, you use them in the current situation. You're not banking them. You're not tallying it on a thing. You're not taking a token. You're just like, how can I succeed on this situation while explaining how I got a positive in the situation and a negative in the situation, and that becoming a conversation between the players and the GM on how it can play out in like a cool, fun way is a really, really fun way to use that kind of mixed success, different than, the 7 and 9, standard PBTA situation. It really lends itself to the narrative, and the whole concept of like justify it narratively really feels like a core part of the game. As you get these dice pools bigger, you're probably gonna succeed most of the time, but how does it work out narratively, good or bad? It's really clever. Really clever. Yeah,
and I like anything too that has, and I think it sounded like from what Diogo had said before too, this is probably something that will get fleshed out even more, a little more specifically, I guess, discreetly, in terms of like, I could see there being a table that says these are ways you can spend boons or setbacks, like examples, that got an example table to say, hey, if you get 3, you don't have to make that 3 different details. You can make that one really beneficial detail, because games like Genesis use something similar to that. But the thing that I like with mechanics like this is that they are very like, you can really easily dictate how your table employs them. Diogo even said in the chat, he said, to be fair, the game works fine without the boons and setbacks with just success and failure. So you could be like, I just want to play it as a pretty straightforward. I think that you would lose something if it's me, but I do get what he's saying of hey, you know, really all you need is a success or failure to play an RPG. But I do like that it could be you're like, I want to stick to the tables, the books, the example, or I'm going to be real hardline about it or really soft edged about it. Any mechanics that are, you know, like that, where you could see how you could quickly adapt it to your players and your table. I like, rather than feeling like we have to refer to a table all the time, which I do think is where games like Genesis go. They have like full page crit tables and things that are like, okay, for this narrative focus, this is maybe more than I want to dig into the specifics here. But this is a nice, seems like it would be a nice in between. We'll see how it develops, I guess.
I guess you can play without it, right? You could play D&D without advantage and disadvantage too. Exactly. I don't think you should at all. I think this feels as much of a core as just the standard test. I mean, like this is the game, you know. I think the ability I think when we were playing, the fun that we had with the way that we could pass these boons and setbacks out and how it worked and how it was the conversation and the narrative, like was so core to the game. I think it would be a completely different game without it. I think it is really important. It is games like this though, are, I think, hard transitions for people that have only played something like 5e, in that it puts a lot of narrative impetus on not just the GM or the referee, but the players as well, to kind of come up with a lot of stuff on the spot, you know. And I know when I first started switching over, that is kind of hard, because games like 5e, for example, they give you everything. You don't really have to think. You're just like, okay, well, this happened, so I reference this and this and this. But when you kind of have that freedom to be able to kind of do anything, when you first encounter that, it's almost restrictive. Like, I can do everything, so I don't know what I should do. You know what I mean? It's like being 25. But it once you get used to it, and once that doesn't feel like a burden, it does feel like a freedom, it changes your perspective on gaming. Like, it really, really does. And you seek out these more kind of narrative games. And one of the things I like about this is it does kind of give you that mathy aspect, but it does give you this narrative freedom. And since it's more of a conversation with everybody at the table versus just like the GM coming up with the consequence for a 7 and 9 roll, I think it makes it a little bit easier, since it can just be a conversation on like basically what's the coolest way we can do this. But like you said, I think the game loses something huge if you take these out, and I definitely wouldn't. But it does take some getting used to. Even people that have played systems like this before, since this one does use it a little bit differently. But once you get used to it, once you've had a turn or two, it felt supernatural, and you immediately go into that like, okay, I got 2 banes, I got 2 boons. Sorry, how am I gonna deal these out this time? So. It's great. It's clever. I love it.
Yeah, especially too, that's the kind of thing, yeah, like you said, there is a lot up for table or player interpretation within that. But yeah, it's like this is the kind of thing that I would want my player group to be as thinking as actively about it makes you think more actively about the scene. And I would want it to be the kind of thing where my players ideally are volunteering negative dice for themselves, which I think actually did come up once or twice in ours, of being like, I know I said my guy is like almost 9 feet tall or whatever. Right. Like I was like a really tall, sort of half giant kind of guy when we played. And it's like, I should probably take a negative for that. The more that you get, everyone's thinking about that. How do we more fairly, you know, hone this role to the scene on both positive and negatives? I think is always fun. I like anytime a player goes, actually, my role should be at disadvantage because of this or whatever, you know. And it feels like that. It feels like, you know, you're going to want that sort of vibe of really collaboratively thinking about the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Playing the flaws is always super fun.
Okay, I can keep reading through.
Yeah, keep going for
it. If you can't tell, I can talk a lot. So even 8 pages can take a while. So
2.5 hours in, we're on page 2.
Effort. Before rolling the dice, a player can declare that they are making an effort. The player may sacrifice any number of vitality points, which is your health, essentially. You start with 20, I believe. Any number of vitality points to gain positive dice on a 1-per-1 basis. So spend 1 vitality to get 1 extra die to the pool. If they sacrifice enough vitality points to drop below 0, their character falls unconscious and is dying. See dying in the combat section. This came up to in play. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can spend vitality, which is sort of a both physical hit point and stress. You know, it's a that kind of thing. It seemed like when we played, it wasn't necessarily like the way people traditionally, I guess, or modernly think of hit points. But I do even like here that it says like, hey, you can even do this to the point where you drop to dying. Because then that just strikes me as something that is ripe for drama.
Yeah.
You know, of you going like, I really want to succeed this role. I'm going to use my last 2 vitality and hope that I get the kill on the T-Rex and that you guys can heal me after, even if it kills me, kind of a thing. Because I love stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Diego said it's 10 plus body to start. And I know that I use them a bunch. Yeah, especially in like my magic casting and stuff like that. I was definitely like, let me just throw 2 more dice on there. I'll sack down some vitality. I got down to like, I think 4 vitality at one point. And I was just like, man, if I get hit by that giant club one more time, I'm not casting any more spells. I'll tell you what. So
yeah, it's a very fun and simple risk reward, which is nice because I find that complicated risk reward things people just tend to not engage with because you're already thinking about enough stuff. Character creation. Characters in Primal Quest live in a mythical stone age. They are survivors ready to face any danger in their path. Attributes: assign 3 points among body, strength, dexterity, endurance, mind, perception, memory, knowledge, and heart, willpower, charisma, empathy. An attribute may be reduced to -1 to increase another attribute by +1. No attribute may start higher than +3. So you basically get 3 points to put into anything, and you can take a negative to something to get a 4th point, basically, to spend. Which is what I did because, like you mentioned earlier, I like playing into failure. So I like having someone who's bad at something too. So when we played, I took a -1, and then also that +2 is like, that's a big increase, right? Like because the numbers are so small for everything, going from +1 to +2 is like, you're really good at that thing.
huge. Yeah. I threw all mine into mind because the way we started the game, I kind of was this like magic user, kind of discovering like magic, whatever. So I threw it all into that, and then had just 0 and everything else. So it was just like, if it's anything outside of mind, I'm pretty screwed. But it was fun. It's interesting, like the choice system that comes into it. So
then after that, we get into the sort of the real, more unique, I guess, aspect of this, the tags. Create 5 tags that define the character. Concept: who is this character? Where are they from? What's their occupation? Are they a hunter, a shaman, a lore keeper? Talent: what's something that sets the character apart? What can only they do? Do they have keen eyes, sharp reflexes, or eidetic memory? Motivation: what drives the character forward? Is it honor, duty, riches, or do they seek power, salvation, or peace? Relationship: what's a close relationship the character has? What would the character do for them? Do they have an enemy? Trouble: what makes the character's life harder? Do they have a limp? Do they walk with a limp? Do they have an enemy? And yeah, this is like the thing where it's just open. That it's giving you some prompts on questions, but you write whatever you want. So I think for talent, for my character, I did like long jump, but for his concept, he was a beast catcher. He was like he went out to go get the animals that they would then use for like livestock and raise and get milk and fur and stuff from like that in the tribe. So, you can see where those would be generally, like concept and talent would typically be positive, I feel like, but motivation, relationship, and trouble could be equal parts positive and negative, which I think is interesting because like having a certain kind of relationship could really make you go the extra mile to do something, but it could also be like, no, I think in this case I'm not going to do that because I have this other person on my mind, or I don't want to wrong this person or this group or this faction. So I think it's interesting that they aren't just all positive.
Right, yeah, and so we talked about before, the tags are what give you extra dice. So in the adventure we ran, it was a little different because we kind of discovered ourselves as we went through, so we didn't start with 5 tags. And I think the tag thing is another part where like if you don't have experience with these kind of games, it's kind of hard to like what am I allowed to do, a little bit. But once you get that down, and like you said, like the whole concept of like beast catcher, anytime that you can make like beast catcher work for a roll, you just add to the dice pool. So I can't remember. There was a situation where you're like, well, I'm a beast hunter, so if I'm actually like going after this animal or doing this thing, like I feel like that's something that I would have or the ability to do. And like there was, you know, the other person we played with was like the they were like a little they were like Lucy, the missing link thing, and it was more kind of like primate-y, so like climbing up a tree or like going across a rope. You know, they got to actually like add in a dice to their dice pool, and that's how like the tags are kind of used when you use like this as a motivation or relationship or the concept itself. You can just be like, well, I'm this, so sure, add another dice pool for that. So it's a cool, interesting way to do that. And Diego said that they will have D66 tables for all of these in the Essentials 2.0. So concept, talent, motivation, relationship, trouble. You'll have a bunch of tables to use as a starting base if you really want to.
Yeah, it lends itself to that open aspect of the narrative, the theming, the world, that kind of thing too, which I guess I'll say we won't necessarily get to later, because it is one thing that came up in our play that is also sort of not explicitly said one way or the other in the text, but it was very like, hey, do you want to be you're like a simian, like an ascended simian, you know, like a hyper intelligent chimp. You can be that. Or do you want to be a bird person? You can be that. You know, Diogo mentioned having like a time traveler in, I think, his home game, where he said like, oh, they have a guy who's like, I'm like, you know, Planet of the Apes kind of. He's like the guy who crash landed his ship out of time. Nothing in the text here says that it's that open. But I think that knowing that it's that open is really cool, right? Because then you can structure. Then that means that those tags go even farther, because you could be really anything. Like putting a traditional skill system on it it lowers that what's possible, you know. Absolutely. Like your talent could be like cartography, and it's like, no, we aren't the level, like the tech level here is not people who are writing maps, right. You know, but you're like, I have a scanner. I'm a guy from the future. So it's really cool to have it be that open and easily applicable, I guess.
Absolutely.
Okay, so equipment. Every character begins with a sack. This does not count for encumbrance purposes. Choose one of the following options for starting equipment. There's 3 different lists of them. I'll just give an example of one. They're sort of like starter loadouts. So one is a weapon, stone, a weapon, wood, or bone. 1 armor, any, 1 shield, any, 50 feet of rope, 3 torches, fire kit, water skin, 3 units of food, and 3 units of water. Some of the other ones have an arcane foci, however you want to say that. You know, more food and water, a little less weapons, those kind of things. But that gives you an idea. This was the part when I was reading through this that I was like, oh, is this like a little more OSR than I thought? Because something like Fate, you know, isn't going to have 50 feet of rope and 3 torches on it. Right. And then, there'll be a little bit more information on equipment as we go. Other stats, you calculate the following additional stats: vitality equal to 10 plus your body score, body bonus. Determines how hardy the character is. Defense, determined by armor, and shield determines how hard it is to hit the character in combat. And then your details: create the character's remaining essential details. Name, choose an appropriate name for your character. Gender, determine the character's gender as they identify themselves. Looks, describe the character. How do they look? What did they wear? Personality, what is the character's personality like? Are they grim and secretive, or joyful but deceitful? And like I said, it doesn't necessarily say, it doesn't even say that you're a caveman. It doesn't say you're like a prehistoric human. It never even mentions that. But I think because of the art, that would probably be where most people are thinking. So it was cool, at least in our play, to say like, hey, this can really be like a more open-ended, really more pulpy world if you want it to be. You don't have to just be one thing or the other. Do you want me to keep going?
I can pick up here.
Sure.
We're going to get into advancement. So characters will change as they adventure through the world. Experience points is how you advance in this. So characters earn 1 XP by fulfilling any of the following conditions. Another game that kind of does it this way is kind of like Point Buy is Death in Space, where like at the end of the session you go, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? So the conditions are: you survive the game session, which is an interesting thing to have as the very first one, because as you're reading it, you're like, oh, okay, maybe I won't survive. I literally get XP by just surviving. So that's a fun one right off the top. You use a tag for the first time in the session. You earn 1 XP from each tag. You get up to 5 to start. You make an impactful mark on the game world, like you make an ally, acquire an enemy, change a power structure, defeat a powerful enemy. You can earn XP this way multiple times each session. So there's a lot within these three things where you can earn a ton of different XP for various things. Surviving, using your tags, and basically anything that pushes the game forward is a way that you can XP. This is another section where you can be like, well, I did this, well, I did that, and kind of BS your way forward a little bit, which is fun. And then improvements, it's the ways that players can spend XP to improve their character. You can increase an attribute by +1 by spending XP equal to the new score multiplied by 5, a minimum of 5. So if you want to go from 1 to 2, you need 10 XP because you're going to 2 and you multiply by 5. No character can have an attribute higher than +5. So if you're going from 4 to 5, it's going to take you 25 XP to make that last jump up because you're going to 5, then you multiply by 5.
Yeah.
It's a lot of XP.
Yeah. And you will have already had to spend like probably 10, 15, 20, then 25. So
exactly.
How many characters are going to get that far?
Exactly. And how many are going to survive, especially since the first one to gain XP is just to survive. To acquire a new tag, you can spend XP equal to the current number of tags the character possesses multiplied by 3. So if you start with 5, minimum to get another tag is another 15 XP. And then exponentially more after that. And then to change a tag or rewrite it, you spend XP equal to the current number of tags the characters possess. So if you just want to switch out a tag, not gain a new one, if you start with 5, you have to spend at least 5 to switch it out or modify it or rewrite it in some way. So it's basically attribute increases and tag increases or changes is the way that improvements work in the game. But that's the core of the game is attributes and tags.
The thing that I think is kind of interesting just on read, not having like play experience necessarily with it, is I like that on the low end, increasing your attributes is fairly approachable, fairly doable, securable. And I really like that it's very cheap to change your tags. Like it makes me think that this is not a game about becoming a god at the end, right? This is like a game about characters that are shifting and adapting over time. And that's really interesting to me, that you could maybe play a campaign of this. And by the end, maybe you have +3 in something, +2s otherwise, and maybe a 6th tag. But really, you've spent a lot of time in between there being like, what of the things I've lost and gained over the adventure, and how is my player shifted? It's cool to have character, I guess, like development, not necessarily be character power growth,
right.
Becoming more powerful, you're becoming different, which is cool to me.
Yeah. Diego said characters can simply change instead of just improving, which is, like you said, very interesting way to make it feel, like you just said, like not becoming a god, not hitting 20th level and then basically all you can do is fight gods anymore. It's kind of in the same kind of vein as Merkborg is, where you can get better or not, and that's really interesting that you were basically you when you start. It's not like you have to become this greater thing later. You just adapt. It's really neat. It's a clever way to do it.
Yeah, and it's like it's cheap experience wise to be like, maybe your concept changes. Maybe you have like a big pivotal moment and it's like, no, I'm not the beast catcher anymore. Now I'm like a revenant. Like I will hunt this person to the end of the earth who betrayed us or whatever. And it's cool to be able to really cheaply go like, my character's mindset is different, and I'm going to get bonuses in completely different situations now. Not necessarily in a stronger way, just in a different way, which is really cool to me.
It's a really, really neat way to do it. Equipment. So sometimes having the right piece of equipment can make the difference between glory and death. So your resources, currency is almost non-existent in the world, and people barter for what they want when they can't get it themselves. I can't tell you how much I love that, and that's exactly how I would use it in any game that I create, because one of my biggest pet peeves ever, and it's a personal thing to me, and if people do it, that's totally fine for them. I hate like a 3-page list of the cost of a bunch of bullshit, because at the end of the day, it all depends. If you really need a candle, it's going to cost a lot more than if you go to a town full of candle makers. You know what I mean? So like just being like, well, it's always 3 silver. I don't care. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So I like that it says a currency non-existent and you just barter. It's like, what can we exchange for it? Which again helps with the narrative. Everything is evaluating quantities of resources that it is worth. All costs in this section are in resources. There are 2 types of resources, food and water. Humans need 1 unit of food and 1 unit of water per day. There may be rare places like cities that use currency, like shells, beads, coins. 3 units of resources count as 1 unit of encumbrance. So encumbrance says sometimes carrying too many items will slow a character down. You get an encumbrance threshold. So characters can carry up to 10 plus body units of encumbrance comfortably. Same as with your, so your encumbrance score is going to be the same as your vitality. When carrying more than this limit, movement is reduced by half, and all tests are made with plus negative dice. So you automatically get an additional negative dice, and your movement is reduced by half. Which out of combat, you know, it's how you want to play that narratively. Which they're just like limping behind, and like you're probably much more open to attacks from things and ambushes and things like that. And then you have an encumbrance limit. Nobody can carry more than 20 units of encumbrance. Unless otherwise noted, 1 item counts as 1 unit of encumbrance. Some smaller ones can be bundled at the referee's discretion, but remember 3 units of resources count as 1 unit of encumbrance. So there are some tables here, which is all of the gear. There are 4 weapon categories. There's unarmed, small, medium, and large. It lists the cost, the damage, and some notes based on those. So unarmed is 0 cost and 0 damage. So you don't do anything if you're unarmed.
Well, yeah, the only damage you add, which it comes up in the combat section, but your effect,
the effect
would add damage. But yeah, if you just succeeded, yeah, you hit them, but you just like slapped them, like it didn't do anything. You know, but if your effect was like +3, okay, you did 3 damage. You don't have any built-in base that a weapon gives you.
Which is an interesting way to do it, and I do like that, because instead of something where it's like a derived modifier like 5e, right? You have an 18, but it really gives you like a +4. You don't need to worry about both. You just have your score, and then the effect gives you that. It's kind of almost it's almost a little bit of like Maze Rats or Tunnel Goon a little bit, where it's like whatever's left over is kind of after you roll is what gives it to you, but in a different way. And then there's small, which costs 5. It does 1 damage, and you get a positive dice to hide small weapons, and it's a half unit of encumbrance. There's medium, which costs 10. It's 2 damage, and there's large, which costs 20, and there's 4 damage. And you get a negative dice to hide large weapons, and they're worth 2 units of encumbrance. There's 4 armor categories: unarmored, light, medium, and heavy. Unarmored cost and defense is 0. Light costs 10. Defense is +1. It can pass off as normal clothes, and as 1 encumbrance. Medium, it costs 30. Defense is +2. You get a positive dice to pass as normal clothes, and you get 2 units of encumbrance. So that just implies you have to actually roll to convince people it's not armor. Then heavy costs 75. The defense is +3, and it cannot pass as normal clothes, and it's got 3 units of encumbrance. And then there are 3 sizes of shields. The first is a small. It costs 10. You get +1 defense. And then blocks 1 attack before breaking, 1 unit of encumbrance. So that automatically tells you shields are a limited resource. It's not that it soaks damage. It's just it can only take 1 hit and then it breaks. There is an asterisk on defense, so it says after blocking all attacks it can, a shield is broken and no longer provides this bonus to offense, so it's just gone. A large shield, it costs 30. It's also +1 defense, but it blocks 2 attacks before breaking and takes 2 encumbrance. And a tower shield costs 75. It gives you a +2 defense, and it blocks 3 attacks before breaking. It's got 2 units of encumbrance, but you also get a negative dice to attacks and can only take 1 action per round. So you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage if you want to have that +2 defense there to haul around what amounts to like a giant thing. I imagine it's almost like a triceratops head or something that's been like hollowed to the point of just being able to like basically like sling it forward in front of you, and that's about it. And then there is adventuring gear. Characters will find use for almost anything they can find. Below is a list of some sample items. It's up to the referee to determine its cost and stuff. So dried meats, dried fruits, fire kits, torches, just standard adventure gear. And then, give it a little bit of a primal twist. So bone daggers and stone mallets, religious symbols, things like that. And then there is durability. So when using an item or weapon and a setback is rolled, it can be spent to damage said objects based on the material they are made from. When durability reaches 0, the item is broken. So that is one way listed where you can use setbacks. Wood can only be damaged once, so its durability is 1. Bone can only be damaged once, so its durability is 1. Stone can be damaged twice, its durability is 2. And bronze can be damaged thrice, durability 3.
Wonderful use of thrice as always. This whole equipment section was a part for me where I got really excited about this when I was reading through it. I tried to run a really long campaign in Dungeons and Dragons that featured, that was like a more like tribal based structured, like a government socially structured place that did not have money. And let me tell you, does not work in that game. It makes everything hard in D&D if you try to not have money. I really like what you said, the resources thing here too, but I think the thing that's most cool to me is having a simple encumbrance system where it doesn't tie up all of your time and looking at tables and stuff like that. Encumbrance and sort of this durability aspect of like your shields can break, your armor breaks, that kind of adds to that same character thing of this isn't about accruing. This is not a game where in the end you have a keep in an army. This is like you can only ever be as rich as you can carry on your back, right? The things you can carry on your back. And I can feel the points where cool story moments and drama and stuff comes out of these things. Your spear breaks and it's your last one. Which are you going to carry? Do you want to take your backup spear or 2 more days of food? Because like it feels like a lot of this game would be like open overland exploration, those kind of things, and those decisions are always really cool to me. So I liked that this was all here, and especially just thinking as the person probably run this game for my group, I love the idea of being like, oh, you rolled 2 setbacks, your dagger just broke in half.
Yep.
And then them having to figure out what that means for that situation.
Yeah, there's a lot of like choice design in this game, which is always really, really cool. And as a referee, kind of giving, it's not really referee moves, but the setback allows you to change the narrative. One of the aspects of choice design, or an example of it, is resource management, but also taking a resource from the players to alter the narrative. So like you just said, a couple of setbacks can break your thing, and that completely alters the way that your entire character can currently play and the resources that are available to them, which is interesting. And it's just throughout this, there are a lot of these like choice options that really make it interesting for the player and for the referee, in ways that that maybe people don't realize as much. Like the more choice you have in a situation, the more narrative kind of flex you can have in that situation, both from the referee perspective and from the player perspective. So it's great. Again, I think clever is a word that just pops up in my head like over and over again when I read through this, where I'm like, I really like this. And I do like how it's so narrative driven, but you get like just a smidge of crunch, just a little crunch.
Yeah.
Not like a Nature Valley bar, but like just enough to be able to sink your teeth into it a little bit if you like those narrative games. Like it's not just completely freeform. So that's great.
Yeah, and I think having survival and having exploration be something that seems like pretty key, or largely like, pretty key to any sort of longer form play in this game. I feel like that's where the procedures feel good, because then when you survived and you made it and you scrimped and made your way to safety or whatever, it feels earned. It's much harder to get that same rewarding feeling as a player when it's a purely narrative game, if you're just montaging the travel, right. And I like that this has both. It's giving you both a sense of that, but like, hey, you really needed to you needed to plan and travel well and find the the equipment you needed and scrounge and craft another sword, bone dagger, all those kind of things. That stuff I really like. So
absolutely. Do you want to pick up for combat?
Sure. Combat. Sooner or later, characters will have to resort to violence to survive the dangers of the world. Tests in the game are almost always made by the players, but there may be special cases where the referee might roll for the opponents. Round of combat. Time in combat and other action oriented activities are measured in rounds lasting approximately 10 seconds. Combatants can normally take 2 actions every round. A round ends when every combatant has taken their actions or decided not to take them. Initiative. Characters and opponents act in order of initiative. Initiative can be defined by the referee in accordance with the fiction. When in doubt, characters need to make a body test and they will act. If you succeed on the body test, you would act before any opponent whose level is equal to or lower than the result, which level, not a player thing, but it is an enemy thing. We'll get to in a second. Movement. Combatants are in constant movement during a battle. To move between range bands, a character must spend an action. Getting up, lying down, looking for an item in a character's sack, or other similar actions count as movement, as the movement action as well. Characters can perform other small actions while taking a movement action for free, such as drawing a weapon, grabbing an item from their belt, shouting something to an ally, and so on. Range bands. This game has abstracts distance and range into 3 bands: close, a few yards away, in range for most melee weapons, far, further away than a few yards, but still within range of a running character, in range with most ranged weapons, and then distant, further than a character can normally run, usually not in range of any mundane weapon. Attacking. Slashing with an axe, crushing with a giant femur, firing a bow. 1, choose a target within the weapon's range. 2, make a body test with difficulty equal to the target's level or defense. The target hits if the result is equal to or higher than the difficulty. Otherwise, it has failed. Damage. 4, damage is determined by adding the test's effect to the weapon's damage. So an enemy might be level 3. That means the roll is difficulty 3. You roll a total difference of 4 after adding everything, subtracting and adding. Then that means that you would do your damage plus 1 because your effect is 1.
Yeah. And like I said, it's a cool way to have like what amounts to a modifier without having to have like a list of modifiers on your page, which is like a cool way to do it.
Yeah, it keeps it just a matter of getting that little procedure down, and then once you know it, it keeps the character sheet clean and nice on those kind of things. Defending is sort of the other way. Diogo mentioned the referee not really rolling, and that's where this comes into play. Characters can dodge, parry, or avoid attacks in many ways. Make a defense test with a difficulty equal to the attacker's result or level. The enemy's attack is avoided if the test is a success. If the test fails, the character suffers damage equal to the value of the negative effect plus the attacker's level or their weapon's damage. So basically just the same thing. You roll, instead of rolling an attack test, you roll a defense test when the referee tells you they're coming in swinging on you. Go ahead and roll defense. Blocking. Characters may opt to block attacks if they are using a shield. They must declare they are blocking before they roll for defending. When an attack is blocked, it causes no damage, but it damages the shield instead. A shield cannot be used for blocking if it blocks the maximum number of attacks that it can. It is then broken. A broken shield no longer provides its bonuses. So coupling up with what we read in equipment, that, you basically, which is kind of cool to know that, you got your shield. I get 2 free blocks. It's like the whole attack is blocked. So it is, you still have to roll for it, of course, but it's cool that it doesn't do any damage at all. But yeah. Oh wait, no, it's just you just get it. They must declare they're blocking.
Yeah.
When an attack is blocked, it causes no damage. Yeah, so that's cool. I thought you still had to roll and there was a chance you could fail, but it basically just means you get, 2 free defenses or whatever for your shield, which makes those shields a really nice resource to spend. Yeah. Healing. Characters can rest in a safe space where they can bind their injuries. Short rest. Take 10 minutes and allows a character to regain 1d3 plus heart vitality points. Afterwards, the character must pass a body test with a difficulty equal to the number of rests taken that day, or they can't benefit from another short rest, basically not gaming the short rest. Gets harder the more rest you're trying to take within one day. You can only heal so much. Long rest, take 6 hours, and allows the character to regain 1d6 plus heart vitality points. It allows for a test to recover from adverse effects such as poison, illness, other maladies. The character can only take 1 long rest per day. Extended rest takes roughly a week in a safe haven. Characters regain all vitality points and can make tests to recover from injuries and other maladies with a positive die. And then dying. Characters are always at risk of dying. When a character's vitality reaches 0, they fall unconscious and will wake up in 1 hour or sooner if healed with a new scar. Ask the player to describe it. When a character's vitality drops below 0, they are dying. When it drops below 0 is the thing here. They're dying and must make a body test with a penalty equal to their current vitality. If they succeed, they fall unconscious and will wake up in 1 hour or sooner if healed with a new scar. Ask the player to describe it. If they fail, they are injured and will die in 1 hour if not healed. So the dying, at least from my read, pretty difficult to die, at least at the beginning. Yeah. And scars, I don't think are actually written. It is not. I took scars to be negative tags or potentially negative tags. That there is a place on the character sheet, I think, to write scars. But I would, well, I don't know if there is. I thought I saw it somewhere, but maybe I'm making that up. You could put it under extra tags or something.
Yeah, extra tags
for scars, but that's how I took that I would run it. I don't know if I don't believe it explicitly lays that out clearly, but I would have it be like, well, tell me how you got hurt in a way that's narratively appropriate. And then in the future, if that scar, would hold you back in a way, I'm going to make you take a negative dice for it.
Yeah. And Diogo did say they are negative tags. So
yeah, they're negative tags.
Could go into, yeah. And that's great. I mean, the systems like this that are pretty, I mean, like we said, like a moderate difficulty 0, you end up having a lot of boons and setbacks, you roll pretty low. You might go down, a lot hitting 0 and below, but like you just said, like the odds of actually dying a whole lot, it is more difficult. I guess maybe a little bit easier since you do have to make a body test. And at low levels, you have a little bit less body potentially. But yeah, like you just don't lose characters a ton. And I think that kind of aids in creating the narrative of your character as they change and grow over time. Like I can imagine those negative tags from nearly dying changing your character and your entire concept just as much as anything else in the game. So it's interesting, and I really enjoy that in a game like this. It's not like you're going to be making a new character every single time, since change seems to be one of the main drivers for improvement or advancement.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that these are pulp characters, right? Like they get beat up. They do a lot of beating up and get beat up a lot, but you're gonna get episode 59 of Laser Caveman or whatever. It's gonna come. Yeah. It's gonna come back up. So I do like that. It gets like it's easier to die the more that you are in those death situations. It's it sounds like, because if it was me, I'm gonna be like, well, you're probably the more scars are gonna also attribute to modifiers I'm gonna want you to take on certain things and stuff like that. But it is cool that it isn't that OSR. It isn't like I got hit once in the head and I'm dead.
Right.
You're probably going to have teammates. You're probably going to have someone who can heal you. But it also that injured will die in 1 hour if not healed. It's like if you didn't manage your equipment and stuff right, and your party doesn't have any way to heal you quickly, and you're against an overwhelming force, maybe the party has to decide to leave you behind and you die. And I love any of those kind of like, oh my God, no, we used our last poultice in the last fight kind of moments are great. That's the kind of part, that's a part of a campaign like players are going to always remember. Like, remember when you all left me to die because you were afraid of the T-Rex? Well,
yeah. Diogo said that though, like a -3 for vitality is as big as a +3 for body, because you do dying and making a body test with a penalty equal to the current vitality. So if you take a last final blow that puts you way below 0, it is huge. So you want to save that tower shield for that last hit, and hope that you don't really take a big one at the end. We're getting into sorcery, and in my character, actually, when we started through the Cave of Our People adventure, I kind of leaned into the sorcery part of it is this kind of like awakened sorcerer from this liquid that we drank, and it was fun. It's really interesting. After you guys had picked your character concepts, I really wanted to, since there's like a whole page plus of sorcery, it was fun. So sorcery, some individuals can learn to manipulate the primal forces of the world, harness magic their ancestors, or channel the forces of the void. But there's always a cost. So you have this arcane focus. Characters need an item associated with a magic word if they want to be able to use this arcane focus. A default arcane focus is associated with one magic word only. More powerful arcane foci can be associated with multiple words and can be found in the game world. A character can't use magic word to cast spells if they don't carry a respective arcane focus. So basically, like, you have to have something associated with the spell in order to use the spell. So in our game, one of the things that I took early on was an ember from the initial fire that we were at. So I had this like ever burning ember, and that was associated with the word fire. So and then later there was an ice crystal that became like a bigger thing in the game, and I could cast ice, basically an ice spell with it, but I had to actually have the item in order to do that. So here's some example magic words to associate with an arcane focus. There's fire, ice, death, shadow, blade, claw, tree, fruit, life, spider, slumber, breathe, all sorts of different things. It's just like a one word spell that you can use and adapt in any way you see fit. And I know when I cast the spell originally, Diego was like, well, what's it look like? What is it doing? What do you want it to do? Like, excuse me, those kind of things. And those are things that I try to encourage when I play in 5e. It's just like, I and someone's like, well, I cast firebolt. How? Is it an underhand
what
throw?
Does that look like?
Is it an overhand throw? Are you pretending to shoot a bow? Like you're throwing a frisbee? Like, well, like, what do we got? So, in a game like this, obviously it encourages that narrative aspect of the play.
This feels very like primordial, and I like that. Like, you need to have you don't need to have an item with you, and it isn't I need to have a staff. It's like, no, you need to have your staff that lets you do your one thing you can do now. It kind of couples that. It attaches to the encumbrance thing and makes it so like you can kind of only get as rich in magic as you can carry with you, which is also cool. But it gives it that like magic feels like you are tapping into some sort of part of the natural world. It's this like mix between like an intelligent being and a thing, and like which I really like. Like, yeah, in our game, it felt very like you found some primordial chunk of something that maybe you aren't supposed to have, or is outside of your normal. It isn't just like, I know the secret words.
Right. Yeah. You're tapping into the forces. Yeah.
And then it makes the open-endedness of the spells and how they feel more unique, because like the spell you're casting might not be a thing anyone has ever cast before. Someone else may have cast ice, but you're casting ice trying to freeze the floor in front to slick them down. Right. Whereas someone else may have just been like ice bolt. So that's really cool to me too, that it is also as open-ended in some ways as the tag system.
Yeah, the concept, or the ability to interpret in so many different ways was super fun. It was a really fun way to do it. So the steps to spellcasting, sorcery is a dangerous tool. There's 4 steps here. 1, you describe the effect of the spell and explain how the arcane focus allows that effect. A character can combine multiple arcane foci for more complex effects. Number 2, the referee determines if the effect is a cantrip, invocation, ritual, or miracle, which we'll get to in just a second. The caster or any willing or helpless target they touch can spend vitality to add positive dice to the test on a 1-per-1 basis. And the character makes a mind test against the appropriate difficulty. If successful, the spell works as intended. If it is a failure, it has no effect, and any vitality points spent are lost. So basically, just like everything else, like before you roll, you want to declare your intent. The referee basically gives you the cost of that intent, and then you see what happens. And then these 4 different types of spells. You get cantrips, invocations, ritual, and miracles. So there's a difficulty and a casting time associated with them. So a cantrip is a mostly narrative effect. Mostly narrative effects that don't cause direct mechanical impact in the game, such as producing a small flame. So like if I want to turn my ever ever burning ember into like a torch for a little bit so we could have some light. It's a base difficulty of 1, and it takes 1 action to cast that. An invocation, effects that can be reproduced by an individual with the appropriate equipment, such as creating light. Well, never mind. So a cantrip is not creating a torch. An invocation is creating a torch, firing a magical arrow, or climbing a smooth wall. It has a base difficulty of 2, and it gives you an additional negative dice to your test, and it takes 1 round to cast that. So not only is it more difficult, you have more negatives against that. So magic is hard. There's a
or at
ritual.
least it's taking your, rather than being like, if you had a stick, I can hit you with a stick twice per round, but I can only cast a spell that hits you with a stick once per round. So it is very it's a little more dedicated, but I think it's a good balance from the open-endedness of them. It would be very easy to be like, you're really abusing that.
Oh yeah, you could get OP really quickly. But like you said, like this, again, it comes down to this like choice component where do I want to sacrifice my entire round's actions basically to cast this one spell versus using it for something else and potentially gaining negative dice, which could be setbacks and all sorts of things. So a ritual is effects that would require a group of individuals to create, such as bashing a castle gate open, building a temporary shelter, or shooting a fireball from a catapult. It is a base difficulty of 4, which, dang, I don't remember if we ever got above a 4 when we played.
No.
It adds 2 negative dice to the test, and it takes 10 minutes to cast that. And then there is a miracle. These are truly extraordinary effects that cannot be reproduced without magic or advanced technology, like becoming invisible, causing an earthquake, or making a meteor fall from the sky. The base difficulty is 8, which is crazy. It's a 4 negative die added to that dice pool, and it takes 6 hours to cast that. I mean, this is like a. This would be like a.
This is like a big grand scale ritual. Yeah, this is like a. I mean, I know ritual is the other keyword, but this is, in my mind, like, the whole tribe is like, aiding you in a circle for a whole day to like bring a meteor down on your enemy's tribe or something.
And this is one of those moments where, like, if you would not ever forget this, if you actually succeeded on a miracle, it's kind of like in 5e when the cleric can ask for their like godly intervention, but they have to roll under like their level or something on a D100. So like your statistical odds of ever getting that are so small. Like you do it and then you're just like, ah, well, the one time you actually get it and your god reaches down and punches the bad guy in the face, you're just like, oh my god, like that's crazy. So this is crazy.
Or Diogo says sacrifice people to get their dice, get their effort in vitality points. Like get their like literally be like we're sacrificing 3 people to add 15 die to the pool or whatever. Definitely like bigger climactic moment, like end game kind of stuff, like end game like of a campaign kind of stuff. But reading it makes me go like, oh, I want to have a spellcaster in this game that gets to do that.
Well, now you know why I switched over to sorcery when I really did that. Well, the interesting thing about the mechanic, though, is you can sacrifice like a whole tribe's worth of people and roll 50 dice, right? But you can have 1 negative dice, and if you roll a 6 on it, it doesn't matter how many positive dice you had. It still comes out to a 6 minus a 6, which is crazy.
That's what I mean. It's it doesn't have that. You can't stack things to the point of guaranteed success,
right?
Ever in the way that you can with that power creep in some other systems.
Exactly, it's really, really cool. I feel like if I let someone sacrifice like 50 people, though, I'd probably give them some type of bonus to the roll in some way. But and then we're getting into running the game. When running the game, you want to keep some things in mind. You want to present a dangerous world full of possibilities and threats. You want to remember to be the character's senses, describing not only sight and sound, but smells, tastes, and sensations as well. You want to telegraph danger before it strikes, because death will always leave a trail. Always present multiple choices for the players to be open to new possible solutions, as the players will certainly find them. Show the consequences of their actions, for better or worse. The game world is alive and reacts to the characters. Always be fair. You're not playing against the characters, but you're not playing to help them either. You're a referee, a neutral arbiter. Let the dice fall where they may. And reward good ideas and determination. Not everything will work all the time, but don't be stingy when the characters risk so much. at least let them try and make sure they know the risks. So a lot of this comes down to like it's that whole concept of like the modern OSR, rulings over rules. Like the world exists, that's not for the players are in it, and let them do what they want to do. Yes or yes but is the key that I get to a lot of this. Is just like let the players succeed when it feels like they should succeed, and when the dice fall, let the dice fall where they may. You know, no 5e fudging rolls behind the screen for your narrative, because you don't want all your prep work to go to waste when you TPK them, you know. So do you want to take over starting with luck test?
Sure. Luck test. When in doubt about how things will unfold, ask for a luck test. The character makes a normal test without adding any stat, but adds appropriate tags. So the higher the result, the more favorable the outcome. The lower the result, the more unfavorable the outcome. Result close to 0 means that it is not good nor that bad. Come up with a compromise. So, you know, the luck test I always think of, you know, is like, is this kind of thing nearby? Can I find this kind of thing? So I like that you still get to add your tags, because if you're like, well, I'm like one of the tribe hunters, I'm trying to see if there's a sharp rock I could use in the moment to bash this thing to death or whatever, it makes sense that you would be a little more lucky, because at some point you're just more skilled at looking for those kind of things. So seems cool. Random encounters. For every 30 minutes of game time, roll 1d6. On a 1, an encounter occurs, roll another d6. 1 to 3, variations of a common encounter. 4 to 5, unusual and uncommon encounter. 6, weird and dangerous encounter. On a 2, an omen of an encounter occurs. Roll 1d6 as above and describe what the characters witness. Any other result means nothing happens for now. So a 1 in 6 chance of a random encounter. And a 1 in 6 chance of like getting some, you know, hints at encounters to come or the things in the area. Opponents. All non-player characters, NPCs, are referred to as opponents. They have much simpler stats than characters. They have a level that determines how powerful the opponent is, their level of challenge. This is used as the difficulty of tests made against them. Damage determines how devastating their attacks are, used to calculate damage of their attacks. Vitality, typically 1d6 per level, may vary at the referee's discretion. And then special abilities, while the opponent can do what the opponent can do that sets them apart. There are no hard and fast rules for these. Then we get into sort of the last page, which is mostly like the last little bit of getting of that like overland exploration part. So reaction, tying into the opponents. When in doubt at how an opponent reacts to characters, ask for a luck test. Use the result on the table below. So, you know, -5, they're hostile to you. -4 to 3, they're unfriendly. -2 to +2, they're unsure. +3 to +4, friendly. And then a +5 is helpful. I love reaction rolls, reaction tables. They're great. This is just the, you know, a pretty standard one of those tucked into this system. But once again, cool that your tags apply to luck tests, because that means that if you are the soothsayer of your tribe, people are probably going to be a little more friendly to you in general than they would be, you know, someone who isn't. So, and then exploration. The world is full of wonders and horrors to be discovered. Adventure awaits. Rate of exploration. Characters could normally travel 24 miles per day. If carrying more than their encumbrance threshold, they travel 12 miles per day. Use a hexagon map where each hex is about 6 miles to a side and 12 miles across. When passing through difficult terrain in a hex, you travel at half speed. Characters need to rest for 6 hours per day when traveling, or they need to pass a body test with a difficulty equal to the number of days they've gone without sleeping to keep going. And then getting lost. When traveling through unknown lands, characters can get lost. Ask for a mind test with a difficulty determined by the environment. If the characters are successful, they keep traveling according to their plans. If they fail, they get lost and travel to a randomly adjacent hex, believing they're going in the right direction. And then the terrain types are plains, valleys, and roads are difficulty 0, forest, hills, and badlands, difficulty 1, thick forest, tundra, deserts, difficulty 2, swamps, jungles, mountains, difficulty 3. And then camping is the last bit here. Characters will often need to camp in the wilderness to rest. Players need to find a secure location to make camp. The referee may ask for a mind test for them to find one. Only one random encounter roll is made when the camp is in a secure location. Otherwise, make 2 rolls. And then characters can take a long rest when their camp is in a secure location. Otherwise, they can take only short rests. So this last page just, at least in my mind, gave more of that, like I said, sort of tried and true structure to overland travel that I was kind of speaking to earlier, that I, at least in my play, I feel like that's where you get the things feeling fair and earned, that if you're totally in that narrative space, you lose. So I like that. I don't know. How did it strike you? None of this struck me as unusually, like I said, it feels very tried and true OSR.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, like this feels like you just said, a lot of it is tried and true to OSR, but with this kind of like layer of narrative over it. Like there's just the right amount of crunch with I think a lot more freedom than some kind of like OSR and NSR games give. Like you're not looking at, tables and things for everything. But there is enough there that there's enough procedure there, I guess, to make it feel like you're not just making it all up as you go. There was this, I can't remember. I wish I would have. I have it bookmarked somewhere, whether it's on my phone or on a screen. But there was this article I read that talked about the difference between in game design, where there are games that leave a lot to the GMs, the referees, and the players to do, and games that are just unfinished and or feel unfinished. And this game doesn't feel unfinished. It doesn't just say overland travel, GM's discretion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, figure it out.
It doesn't say that. Like, it gives you enough to feel like the game is finished while still having freedom and not having to make up every single bit as you go and just chalking it up to fiat, So like you said, I think it's a great amount of crunch and rules to a game that still feels very light and easily accessible. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I think this part especially is like necessary, even if it's a little bit of minutia at the end. But it's great.
Yeah, it makes sense that with what Diogo told us of that, like him feeling like I love story games but I also love DCC. This feels like that game. This feels like what's the beautiful child of those two things, and I feel like it feels like that. The one thing with overland travel I would probably add if I was running it, that I could maybe see being something that gets added later on, is I would probably just make a more limited action structure to a day. Like Forbidden Lands uses something similar, where it's like you have morning, day, evening, night, and the party picks an action. If it was me running it, I would probably structure it a little more like you get, rather than saying, you can travel up to 24 miles per day, I would just tell my people you can travel 3 hexes per day, and then you need to rest, every 3 hexes or something. I would probably make it a little simpler, just because anytime I feel like the players and the ref are trying to be like, oh, I didn't realize we went for an extra hour. I thought we only went 4 miles. I didn't realize we went this. I envisioned we were more in the middle of the hex because that's where the mountain on the picture is. So that's probably the kind of thing I would implement, just a real quick, like you get 4 actions per day or something. So I can maybe see something like that, but it's also...
Diego said he's going to use 4 watches per day, which makes sense.
That's pretty much the kind of thing, that I was envisioning, is that was the only thing that felt not explicitly written out here. But I think what Diego said is good. Just being like, you have, as a group, you got 4 moves, and you got to spend one of those moves on resting and go from there, kind of a thing, unless you want to incur the penalties and stuff. But really,
I know that
really solid structure.
Mouse Ritter does it that kind of way. I know Durf does it that kind of way with like rounds, turns, and watches. I think it's just really clever. I think Vanilla Game even does it the same way too, using that same kind of like time structure, and it works out really well. Like you just said, like being able to do like X amount per turn, X amount per round, and X amount per watch is just it's just clever. Like it makes it super, super simple, especially if you're traveling across a hex map. And gosh, I love a hex map. Hex crawl, point crawl, like they're just... It's good times.
This one's got a great one too. Just showing it a little bit, but
we'll throw that up on stream here. This map is absolutely gorgeous. So again, here on stream, we do not read adventures of like the intro adventures in zines and stuff on the game or on stream, because you need to go buy the fucking book. Support the creator.
No,
this one's even free. You can go pay what you want if you don't want to. If you can't pay anything. Or don't feel like it. This is Mother's Veil, the mini hex crawl. But go check it out. get the game, and you can see this adventure, this hex crawl, and this absolutely stunning map. They did such a good job with this. I love the Triceratops compass. I think it's absolutely like a badass piece of art there.
More just bleeding atmosphere like everything else, right? It's just oozing with it, which is great.
Absolutely. And this actually takes up about half the zine is this hex crawl before we cruise through that and then get to the back to the page we talked about earlier with the graphic designers, with everything. What else is out there? Do you want to detail the contents of a hex? Do anything in the map? Does anything in the map capture your attention? Create content. And I love it's been my background the entire time I've been here. This specific page and illustration, this spread in the book that has these kind of like red on black cave paintings is just a really, really gorgeous spread. And it's like you just said, bleeds vibe, bleeds the game itself, and really keeps you in the context of the game. And black, red, and white are like my favorite colors to do anything in. So it's really cool. And that is Primal Quest Essentials. I would say after we played, two impressions I took away from it, and some of those have been abated by talking with Diogo and all those kind of things. Is one, it's great. I fucking love this game. Like it's really, really good. It's super hackable to do across any system for like the base core rules and everything like that. But as is this pulp dinosaur setting, amazing. I like I said, I wasn't a dinosaur kid. It was fun for a little bit, but I moved on to different things. But this makes me want to be a dinosaur kid and wish I knew more than just like Parasaurolophus and Triceratops. You know what I mean? And I would say my only knock kind of is the same thing I said in the beginning, is since it is the essentials of the game, there is some things that getting clarification from the creator made it a lot easier. But prior to that, some parts of the rules I were just like, I don't quite understand how this goes. I'm just going to have to kind of figure it out. But with the knowledge that we have, an expanded stuff coming up and things like that as we go into the future, and with us getting a chance to come on here and explain it to you people out there, it makes sense. And what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I came away pretty jazzed about it from when we got to play. I hadn't read it before then, and then because I waited till I got my physical one, or I got like after the PDF from Exalted Funerals when it came in, read through it. And yeah, I really like it. I think that the core works really well. I've been talking too much. Works really well to bridge that more narrative. Totally, this is like half crunch. It's like a half crunchy game, in a way that I think bridges it really well, and it just feels very exciting for me as someone who does like to be able to add details to things as both a player and the referee or like the GM that actually has a mechanical change. But I also do like those rewarding mechanical feel from something. But I typically never go all the way in. Like I'm not the kind of person that wants to sit counting my arrows and my gold and calculate how many hours of the day we can do this thing or that thing. That pure like record keeping, bookkeeping angle is really the thing, but I like doing enough of it that I get the rewarding part from it, if that makes sense. Yep. So I think this does that really well. I think it just speaks to I think too, it's a good core you can imagine building a lot of things on top of. I talked to Diogo about being like maybe doing a more like a bestiary type thing and adding like a way to come up with tables that you can harvest stuff from, things that you hunt and kill, and then craft with that. What does crafting look like? What is Diogo earlier mentioned that they either he or someone else is working on like tribe building, like developing out your tribe, and you bringing back resources and then using that to like invest in things in your little village and stuff. And it's easy to think of all the different cool hacks and stuff people could plug on top, but it's definitely on the top of my pile to get to the table. And the add-on, the like third-party stuff that's already there is really cool. Like the Primal Belief pack, that zine is basically just a way to come up with like gods and sort of like proto-religions for your people to follow. There's already some sample adventures or two. The introductory one we played with Diogo, and then 2 other pamphlets from like a third party. And yeah, so it's definitely not. It doesn't feel quite as it's not like, you know, getting the beta book, the 0E book at a just handed that for like Mothership or something. It definitely already has more of a structure around it. So I would agree though, in terms of like the text itself, when this is like a full thing, you'd probably want more of that. But as someone who sits and reads way too many RPGs all the time, most of it clicked for me, you know. But
Yeah,
if you were totally new to it, you might be a little lost with what's here now. But I think probably most of your listeners would be like, I can read this and get it. So it's very, very usable.
Yeah, I mean, I think usable is a great word for it. I mean, you know, even as someone who does read a lot of RPGs, there was one or two parts from like, and you know, it was like I would have done it like this, and that ended up being the way that you would have done it. But as you said multiple times, there's going to be more. There's going to be further explanation, examples of play tables, all those kinds of things, and it is really cool to kind of get in. I guess like get in on the ground level, I guess is a great way to do it. And I think Diogo's doing a really smart way to like keep this core essentials, first of all, really well done, well produced and gorgeous, but free and accessible. Like you said, get people excited, do jams, get third-party content cruising, and then get into like the meatier things that are heavier that might take some Kickstarter funding and things like that, but already have like a really cool core like diehard community around it, and get excitement for things like that. It's a really smart way to do it. It's really clever, and I'm just excited to see where it goes. It's a great system, and there's gonna be hacks on hacks on hacks of this. I mean, it's gonna be like Merkborg and Lumen and like all these other systems that just, you know, you're gonna see a million different things with a million different settings running this core system because it's just really well done. And that's Primal Quest. Did you, I know you were talking about a bestiary a little bit. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that? Or is that just kind of like on the table at some point?
It's on the very early stages. I would say I would speak to what Diogo mentioned earlier, though, of like him being like, I want to try to help make anything happen I can, that kind of thing. He's obviously been very easy to reach out to and communicate with on Twitter and stuff when I like told him I was interested, or mentioned being interested, that kind of thing. So I would say I would just definitely second what the book says and says, if you read through this and you get it and you feel inspired, like really try to make something with it, because there is a lot of support there. That's really all I guess all I would say at this point is, yeah, I'm planning to try to do 16 to 20 page zine bestiary type thing for this. That's a lot of like a lot of mostly stat blocks and art. But it's really early. Like, I don't know if this is, I don't know if my planning of it's really early, I guess. I mean, I don't know if this is a commission a lot of art for it thing, or if this is a use Diogo's cool stock art packs kind of a thing. But yeah, so I'm thinking of doing that just because right now, unless you're using one of these adventures, you don't have a big pool of monsters and stuff creatures and beasts to go off of. But then I'm also, because I like to add more work to myself, putting in lists of sapients, which are going to be like 6 factions of other intelligent beings that you can encounter that wouldn't be so much like you're guaranteed to fight them on sight, or they're going to attack you when they see you like a dinosaur might. This is more like you stumble upon people, that kind of thing. And then other weird stuff, because I really like the open-endedness of this. So the third section of it is called Other Things entirely, that are just going to be like, this is a star spawn from the void, weird out there kind of things. But yeah, it's pretty early on. I'm still fleshing it out, but Diogo's been very open and helpful too, which is cool to be like, I can put you in touch with Exalted Funeral if you do it, or maybe you and I, we can collaborate on it. So I think that, if anyone comes and is feeling inspired, they should go after it. Cause that was my thought. Was I haven't done anything like that before. I've mostly done adventure writing. So doing a more source book kind of thing seemed kind of interesting to me. And the tags are very creative still. Like, being able to give special abilities to the enemies means that, and tags means like you can still get weird, even though the numbers, the 3 or 4 numbers associated with the monsters are pretty straightforward. It means I could see there being a lot of fun in creating really unique enemies that way.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it. I mean, obviously, when it gets up and going, we will. We'll be chatting about it, especially since you are now a friend of the show, Christian Sorrell, just like Diogo Nogueira is friend of the show. Really excited. And I got to say, thank you so much for coming on the show. It it was really cool to actually get to, as I said at the beginning, to play this game with you and Diogo, and then actually come on and chat about it with you. And it was the first time we've ever had a host that wasn't Jason or Hunter. And it was fantastic. I really appreciate your insight. You clearly, obviously know what you're doing and talking about with RPG design and stuff like that. And it was really cool to chat. You know, I think we had a 3.5 hour episode for a game that has 8 pages of rules, but it was super fun to dig deep and really do a deep dive on a smaller game. So really appreciate that. For everyone out there, you know, follow us on our socials. We got a plug here at the end. You know, we're the Weekly Scroll on Instagram. We're weekly_scroll at Twitter. And we are the Adventure Archive on YouTube. The Weekly Scroll is under the umbrella of the Adventure Archive, but we also do actual plays. We're running a second adventure of Death in Space right now over on the actual play side. And I will say at some point I will be running Primal Quest on the AP side of that as well. So go check out that, you know, subscribe to YouTube, the Adventure Archive right there. And that's about it. Again, Diego's been in chat the whole time after the interview, and we really appreciate his insight in that. And once again, super appreciate you coming on the show. It's fantastic to have you as a guest co-host, and just let us know anytime you're doing anything going forward, and we'll be sure to have you on. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, you have a wonderful day, and that's it. Bye.